Testing.
Figured one of me was.
Guess we're ready to go. Bridget, we all set? Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the December 17th, 2024 meeting with the Planning Board. Everyone but George Turner is present. Prior to the beginning of the meeting, I'd like to recognize Paul Leclerc, who is finishing up his 8 years of service to the Cumberland Planning Board, which takes, and I would like to read a letter. Dear Paul, we want to express our sincere gratitude for nearly 8 years of dedicated service on the Cumberland Planning Board. Your contributions have been invaluable to our community, and we are deeply appreciative of your time, expertise, and commitment. Your hard work and dedication have helped shape our town into the wonderful place it is today. We are truly grateful for your contributions and wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Thank you again for your exceptional service. Signed, Bridget Perry, Director of Planning and Sustainability, Matthew Sturgis, Town Manager, and myself as Planning Board Chair. Paul, you've done a great job, and we're going to miss you.
Thank you. It was a privilege and just serving the town and everyone on this board and the people that preceded us all. Thank you.
And also to note that George Turner, who filled in as an interim on the resignation of Jason Record, has decided to step down. So come January, we will have 2 new members of the Planning Board. So that being done, I'll look for a motion for the approval of the November 19th, 2024 minute meetings.
So moved, and I believe they were amended. So
I had made your correction, Paul, and the ones I posted were the corrected ones, so you don't
All right.
have to adopt them as amended.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Any other discussion? Then all in favor? Okay, we have no staff site plan approvals. We have no minor change approvals. And we'll move into hearings and presentations. And our first item is public hearing on a major conservation subdivision plan final review for Coastal Pines subdivision, a proposed 9-lot subdivision located at 96 Harris Road, tax assessor map R03, lot 38A, and a portion of 52 Priscilla Way, tax assessor map R03, lot 39B in the RR2 zoning district. The applicant owner, Harris Road LLC and J.W. Demers LLC, and the representative is Eric Doobie of Trillium Engineer. Bridget?
I guess I'll just hand it over to Eric at this point. We've seen a lot of this. I think we're, at this point, pretty good to go. We'll let Eric give us an update.
Thanks, Bridget. Appreciate that. So Eric Doobie, Trillium Engineering, principal. Basically, I agree with Bridget. I think, based on our last meeting that we had with getting approved for preliminary and then being into final meeting tonight, we had a bunch of drainage issues, or I say a bunch, some minor drainage issues to clean up. I think we've cleaned those up. We also had, since the last meeting, a peer review specifically by the hydrogeologist. I know we understand well has been a concern, or amount of well water capacity has been a concern. So the peer review by CV and Mahar basically had stated that they agreed with the our assessment. They asked us to change some of the calculations to go with the lesser amount. So for instance, they said the recharge can be between 7.5% and 20%, we went back to our hydrogeologist, and essentially, they even went lower than that. They went to a 5% rate, so they reduced it even more than what was requested on the peer review. And so we basically need 1.42 millions of gallons per year. And what we came up with, the 5%, and that's in your packet, is basically 1.79 million gallons per year, which is still, even at this very conservative rate, is still 26% over. And that's just the recharge from our land. So basically, at this point, we've got two professional hydrogeologists that are stating that we have enough capacity, and we've taken an ultra-conservative number at that point to make sure that we had that. So that was it. I'm happy to answer any questions at this point. And
I'm just wondering, for the benefit of, before I start, I did make a mistake that I own about 50 feet of road frontage that's across the street from this development. It reaches way back into my back 40. What's being done here bears no direct effect on anything I'm doing, but I feel that I need to disclose this and also indicate that I feel that I can fairly judge this product. So I will turn that over again to the board as I have each one of the meetings to make the determination.
I will speak for the board, I guess, and seeing no one dissenting, that I'm fine with you listening and voting.
Okay, but I just want to be totally above board on that. I'm wondering, again, given the fact that there have been a lot of questions from the abutters on this, if our peer review hydrologist might just kind of briefly do an explanation of peer review hydrology 101 for the folks.
Happy to do so. My name is Lisa Jacob. I'm a principal at CV and Mahar Engineers, and we were engaged by the town to do a peer review, specifically the hydrogeologic desktop study done by Haley Ward for the applicant, and it was relative to water supply. And so we sent a letter to you all earlier in December, summarizing that we went through the data and the reporting that Haley Ward based their study on, the basis for their desktop review. And we understand and concur with what they used for, what the data and reporting that went into their review and the assumptions that were made. We understand and concur with the water balance approach that they took, that what is needed, and the conservative approach that was used to identify supply needed for these 9 subdivisions. And then the assumptions that were made as to what the groundwater recharge would be. One recommendation that we had made was that they revise their desktop study, their water balance, to use bedrock recharge rather than till soil recharge or published values for till, because the overburdened soils are very thin. They can be, there aren't that many wells around, but the wells that are published in the area have as few as 3 feet of soil above bedrock, as much as 45 feet, but seem to be more shallow soils or thin overburden. And so we suggested that they use a recharge rate based upon bedrock rather than till soils, which we understand that they did do. And I think that that's what, if I'm following correctly, I haven't seen the updated assessment, but I understand that between the 7.5 to 20% recharge rate had been based on published literature for till soils, and they updated it using a 5% recharge rate for bedrock in response to the recommendation that was made. And so that took, I think it was what had been proposed as 3.59 million gallons per year of available recharge, and that shifted it using this very conservative update. That took that to 1.79 million gallons of water based on groundwater recharge within the site boundaries, and that remains in excess of what is needed, again, based on a conservative assessment of need.
So that assumes that within that 10 acres or 11, 12 point something, with 8 drilled wells, that there will be a sufficient water for all 8 of those houses then?
It does. There are things that we can't know, right, until we put wells in the ground. So I'm certain that everybody acknowledges that. We don't know what depth we might need to drill to reach bedrock fractures, but we do have a reasonable expectation of productive water-bearing bedrock fractures based upon the performance of wells in the general area.
Okay.
So we know 9 dwellings. We know what the predicted and published suggested demands are, and we can make some again desktops. So we haven't put a hole. Nobody's put a hole in the ground to test this. Until we do, it remains desktop. But based upon that, there is plenty of water.
So any
6%
questions from
in
the
it.
board of our peer review hydrologist? Paul?
No, other than in section Q, there was a discussion about the recharge and
Okay,
the
yeah.
79% figure came up. Is that about average for most subdivisions?
79%. Can you direct me to what that
Well, it was
number
in
refers
section,
to?
I'm always looking for it here, and I can't find it. It's 500 pages. But it was, I think, the amount of water that the percent of the recharge was 79%. So the water needed was 79% of the recharge, which is, and then there was a comment that was pretty good. In other words, it's 20% extra water. Is that, I'm just asking, is that about average for most projects that you've worked on?
That's a great question. I'm not sure that I could put it in terms of average projects. When every site is different with respect to what the draw will be and what the overall site boundary. So you look at recharge for the and this study looked at recharge within the entire site. And Eric made the good point that there will, and the study itself made the point also that there will likely be more recharge than what we were predicting because we're cutting it off at the site boundary, which is a bit artificial. So there's likely to be more water there. But I would hesitate to put it in terms of average projects because lot size, ground cover, overall parcel size relative to the proposed impervious surface it would be very difficult for me to frame it that way for you.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sorry, I don't have a good response.
Any other questions of the board from our peer review? Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
You may be called upon again, depending on public comment. Thank you. Any other questions of yes?
Yeah, one other for Bridget, I think. There's a letter from Skowhegan Savings that a credit review is necessary. Is that adequate based on that letter?
It is adequate for now. Yep, we'll work with the town staff and the town manager to get the schedule of values and the firm amount set prior to the pre-construction conference.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from the board? Then not, before I open the public comment, any letters that we receive prior to the meeting go into the record. The board has seen all of them, and they're a public record. If you went on the agenda, you got to see the same thing we did along with the letters. In this case, we did get one letter just today that I'll read. This is from Rebecca Lamb, and says hello to Bridget. Hello, Bridget. Thank you very much for taking time to talk with me last Thursday about our concerns regarding well water adequacy for the Coastal Pines development, as well as potential effects on abutters' wells. Below is the email we had sent to the incorrect email address for last week's board meeting. As I mentioned, an additional concern is the fact that our closest neighbor on Harris Road has stated that their 800-foot well currently runs dry in the summer if they water their gardens, and it takes time to recharge. We warned of the same possibility with our well by our contractor. We are hoping to be able to attend this meeting, but please let us know if you have any questions. And I think the other letter was in the,
Yeah,
then
it's on
we
the
have
back.
her letter. My family has recently built a house at 138 Harris Road, which is adjacent to the proposed Coastal Pines subdivision at 96 Harris Road. We listened to the previous planning board meetings and heard concerns regarding the water table, as well as how this development may affect current owners' water use. We drilled a well and found no water close to 700 feet. Fracking was performed, and we were able to produce water at that time. Our well only produces 3 gallons of water a minute. Our closest neighbors on Harris Road indicate that their well is closer to 900 feet. We are unable to attend the planning board this evening, but would like to voice our concern about the water table in this development and recommend appropriate testing and surveillance. Sincerely, Joel Cretion and Rebecca Lamb. So at this point, I'll open up the public hearing for anybody else that wishes to speak. Excuse me, just, you need to come up to the podium.
Okay, sorry, I'm new here.
And state your name and where you live, please.
Hi, so my name is Karen Gophert. My mother lives at 125 Harris Road. And so we are just across the road from the new 138 property. And I would share, unfortunately, my mother is she lives here part-time of the year. She's older. But we share the exact same concerns that everybody else has raised. We have a well, our property's on a well, and there is always a concern that it will, dry up. And I think it's also important to recognize a lot of these houses that were built on Harris Road, originally, it was a different time. And people were not using washing machines and lots of big appliances, which I imagine, any new house is going to be, people are going to be using their washing machines all the time and just pulling loads and loads of water out of the ground. So I think that's something that really needs to be taken into concern. And I certainly think 9 new houses on Harris Road is way too many. Also, I know the traffic issue has already been discussed, but I'll just add as color. I was on a walk with my disabled brother today at 4 o'clock up to Route 9 and back, 45-minute walk. There was not a single time, there was not a car going up and down Harris Road, and that is with the current level of development. So with another 9 houses, it's just going to turn into a superhighway. Again, all those older houses from I'm not sure who lives, actually Lamb, the Lamb house and the house across from the Lambs, down, that was the original Harris Road and it ended there. So all the older houses, they're right there on Harris Road. So they're going to have all this traffic going. Mr. Bingham, you're set back, but every other house is right on the road. So they're going to be terribly disrupted. But anyway.
Thank you. Oh, you got anything more?
No, it was mainly the traffic and the water that we were most concerned about, I would have to say, from our perspective. And sorry that we're a bit late, but as I said, we don't live here all the time.
You're welcome.
Unfortunately, we're here for the holidays. Thank you.
Pauline, you?
Colleen Higgins, 59 Harris Road. I want to thank the board for being respectful of the abutters, asking their questions and, listening to us. I appreciate that a lot. I know that there was some contentious times and some of the questioning back and forth, and that was hard to sit through. But I appreciate you doing the details of, evaluating, the runoff, the traffic, the water, all that stuff. I'm obviously very sad that this is going to happen. We've been there almost 50 years, and I like the field. It's just a very big sadness for me, but it's the way it is. I do appreciate the board listening.
Thank you, Colleen.
Yeah.
Anybody else from the public wish to comment? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. And we've already approved the waivers. So I'll turn it over to the board to see where we go. I guess are we ready to review the findings of fact?
So we read them, but we read them from the perspective of a preliminary review.
Correct.
So do we need to read them in totality again?
Yes, they've been updated as we've received more information.
So what this is for you folks that don't get to these, that actually our job is we're quasi-judicial. And it's not whether the thing should be built or not. It is, does this project meet to our satisfaction 17 standard conditions of approval? And what Lorraine is going to go through now are the 17 different things that we look at. So just to give you an idea that we don't evaluate the merits of the project, whether it should or should not be built, should they meet the 17 standards of the subdivision ordinance, which now Lorraine will read.
Starting with A, pollution. The subdivision is located in FEMA Zone X, an area of minimal flood hazard. A subsurface investigation confirmed that the soils and subsoils are adequate to support subsurface wastewater disposal systems, and passing test pits were confirmed for each lot. Streams will not be utilized for disposal of effluents. The project will be constructed on soils suitable for the development. The board finds the standards of this section have been met. B, sufficient water. The project will be served by private well supply. The applicant's desktop hydrologic assessment dated September 16, 2024, and updated December 9, 2024, finds that sufficient water is available for the foreseeable needs of the subdivision. The board finds that the standards of this section have been met. C, municipal water supply. Not applicable. The project will be served by private water supply. The board finds the standards of this section have been met. D, erosion. An erosion and sedimentation control plan illustrates best management practices to be followed as to not cause unreasonable soil erosion or reduce the land's capacity to hold water. The board finds that the standards of this section have been met. E, traffic. The total approximate increase in traffic activity due to the subdivision project is 110 weekday daily trips. Estimated 8 trips during the weekday AM peak hours and 11 trips during the weekday PM peak hours. This is below the MDOT threshold for a traffic movement permit. Site distance measurements exceed the minimum requirements. The board finds that the standards of this section have been met. F, sewage disposal. The proposed homes will be served by individual subsurface wastewater disposal systems. Soil testing concludes that the soil is adequate to support single-family dwellings on each of the proposed 9 vacant lots. The board finds the standards of this section have been met. G, municipal solid waste disposal. Cumberland provides curbside trash collection and recycling through a contracted waste hauler. The addition of 9 new homes will not cause a burden on the municipality's ability to dispose of solid waste. The board finds that the standards of this section have been met. H, aesthetic, cultural, and natural values. There is a letter on file with the town from Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry stating there are no rare botanical features within the project area. There is a letter on file with the town from the Maine Historic Preservation Commission stating that there are no historic properties affected by this project. A letter with evidence of no significant wildlife habitat is pending from the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. This is a proposed condition of approval. With the proposed condition of approval, the board finds that the standards of this section have been met. I, conformity with local ordinances and plans. The plans have been reviewed by the town planner, town department heads, and the town engineer, and the review of the project's design concludes that it is in conformance with the Cumberland zoning ordinance, subdivision ordinance, and comprehensive plan. The board finds that the standards of this section have been met. J, financial and technical capacity. Financial capacity. A statement of financial capacity has been provided. Technical capacity is evidenced by the use of professional technical consultants as outlined in the application packet. The board finds the standards of this section have been met. K, surface waters outstanding river segments. Both forested and wet meadow wetlands were found within the wetland survey area. Several Maine Department of Environmental Protection regulated streams were located. 3 areas containing vernal pool habitat were identified. 2 of these vernal pools are naturally occurring and significant per MDEP. Appropriate setbacks have been illustrated on the subdivision plan. The proposed subdivision will not adversely affect the quality of that body of water or unreasonably affect the shoreline of the body of water. The board finds that the standards of this section have been met. L, groundwater. The proposed subdivision will not adversely affect the quality or quantity of groundwater as evidenced by the hydrogeologic study. The proposed location of septic systems and wells are appropriate. The board finds that the standards of this section have been met. M, flood areas. The development is not located within a 100-year floodplain as shown on the applicable FEMA flood insurance rate map. The board finds that the standards of this section have been met. N, stormwater. A stormwater management report was provided and is adequate for storm water management. The board finds that the standards of this section have been met. O, freshwater wetlands. A wetland delineation was completed on June 7th, 2024, identifying both forested and wet meadow wetlands, which have been identified on the submitted maps. The board finds that the standards of this section have been met. P, river, stream, or brook. Several Maine DEP regulated streams were located during a site survey and have been identified on the submitted maps. The board finds the standards of this section have been met. In terms of design and performance standards, none of the standards or designs are applicable.
I will make a motion that we adopt the findings of fact as written.
Seconded.
Here a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Right now, it looks like we have got 10 conditions of approval, which I will read. A copy of the recorded plan will be provided to the town within 90 days of the planning board approval. The permit by rule from the MDEP is required prior to the pre-construction conference. A letter with evidence of no significant wildlife habitat from the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife will be provided to the town prior to the pre-construction conference. 4, foundation drain design plans shall be provided to the code enforcement officer prior to the issuance of building permits. 5, a performance guarantee for an amount and form acceptable to the town manager will be required prior to the pre-construction conference. 6, all clearing limits shall be flagged and approved by the town engineer prior to the pre-construction conference. 7, all legal and technical review fees shall be paid to the town prior to the pre-construction conference. 8, a pre-construction conference is required prior to the start of construction. 9, a blasting permit, if required, shall be obtained from the code enforcement officer. And 10, an electronic copy of an as-built plan shall be submitted to the town planner prior to the issuance of certificates of occupancy. Anything else? Anything else? Okay, so,
I will make a motion that we approve major conservation subdivision final plan review for Coastal Pines subdivision, a 9-lot subdivision located at 96 Harris Road, tax assessor map R03, lot 38A, and a portion of 52 Priscilla Way, tax assessor map R03, lot 39B, in the rural residential 2 zoning district, subject to the standard condition of approval and the 10 proposed conditions of approval.
do I hear a second?
Second.
The only comment I would have is that I remain, I think, as far as with some concerns with the well, but one does not go against engineer type things. I mean, my engineering degree is from Little Golden Books, so there's no way I could presume to go against. So looking for a vote. Yes, Ann.
Yeah, I just want to comment that I'm pleased with the response to the comments that were made at the last presentation. I think that the engineering firm and the developer have provided us with a very complete package.
Thank
Any
you.
other discussion? Then all in favor? Yes.
No discussion, but I wanted to thank Colleen, if she's still here, for thanking us, and I would like to thank the public for participating in the process. And one of the standards of approval mentions the comprehensive plan, so I'm just going to put a little plug that that's something that the town is going to be working on in the very near future. So I encourage you all to stay engaged in the process and have your voice heard as part of that comprehensive plan as it gets reviewed. And if you see things going differently for the town in terms of development, that's the place to really engage and pay attention.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? We wish you well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. And this is a presentation, and it's a pre-application workshop for an amendment to an approved site plan, Maine School Administrative District 51, MSAD 51, for the addition of a new pre-kindergarten through first grade school and associated improvements located off Tuttle Road, tax assessor map U11, Lot 4A, and Main Street at tax assessor map U11, Lot 1. The applicant owner is MSAD 51, and the representative is Pat Carroll from Carroll Associates. Prior to this thing, just want to lay down one ground rule, that this project has been approved by the voters of Cumberland and North Yarmouth. Thus, any discussion of whether certain parts of it should be in or not within our purview. All our purview is to determine if this project meets site plan requirements, and all comments that we've previously received have been very articulate to those concerns. So just as a word, I am not going to entertain whether a thing was legitimate or wasn't. So going on, Bridget.
Sure. So this is a early look at what's been going on with the MSAD for the planning board before we see the full-on application for the site plan amendment. A lot of work going on. I believe that there are a lot of people, abutters, citizens who are here to maybe make some comments. So while the board is not required to accept comments from the public because it is a pre-application meeting, I would encourage you to do so if you're willing.
You will be able to comment for as long as you want to.
And so you've seen some of the notes that have come in through email. There's been a lot of work going back and forth with the town and the school district, and so we're all really working hard on this together. And Pat has teed up a good presentation for us with the support of his team. So I'll hand it over to Pat or Jeff.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Jeff Porter, the superintendent at MSCD 51, and Pat will be providing the presentation, but I just have a few words to introduce. First of all, the whole idea for the plan that you're going to be presented with started back in 2018 with our strategic plan for MSAD 51. And this came out of community conversations back in 2017-18, where our enrollment in the district has started to go in a different direction than had been forecasted before that. And so the goal of the strategic plan, and that strategic plan is still in place today, review the district's long-term elementary education program and structures due to increasing enrollment now and into the future. And just to give you a quick baseline again, for Mabel I. Wilson School, which is pre-K through grade 3 right now, in 2014-15, there were 537 students enrolled in the school. Today, there are 730 students enrolled, and next September, there'll be 752 that we project enrolled at Mabel Wilson. At GMS 4-5, 2014-15, there were 315 students. Today, there's 375 students, and in September, we'll have 387 students, just to give you an idea about the continuing enrollment increases. So elementary pre-K to 5, in 2014-15, there were 852 students altogether. Today, there's 1,105 students, and in September of this year, or 2025, there'll be 1,139 students. So currently, we have 29 modulars on the campus. 22 of them are at Mabel I. Wilson School, and 7 are at GMS. And we are needing to add 2 more rooms the summer of 2025 in order to keep up with enrollment. In 2019, the Board of Directors of MSDD 51 appointed an elementary education steering committee. We had 18 people on that committee, and the committee recommended building a new primary school at the end of the 9 or 10 months that committee was in existence. Since 2019, there's been 4 separate locations and 4 separate designs that have been developed for a new school, 2 in North Yarmouth and 2 in Cumberland. The board sent 2 proposals to the voters. The first time they sent it in November of 2022 for 80 Gray Road in North Yarmouth, and as you know, that bond failed. The second attempt by the board was in June of 2024, and as we know, that bond passed. Since the passage, there's been a 25-member building committee headed by Tim Valente. Tim is here tonight, who has worked through the details of the site plan with the architects and with a number of community members, 25 of them. And they'll be, Pat will be talking about that plan tonight that the building committee has developed. There has also been a simultaneous 19-member turf committee, which has been appointed by the board as well. And that's worked on this project, and it's been led by Jesse Lamar Vincent. Both committees have worked closely with Stephen Blatt Architects during the last several months and Pat Carroll Associates. And so we want to be thankful. I just want to say I'm thankful to Stephen Blatt Architects and Pat Carroll Associates for all their work and working with our committees, and just thankful to our building and turf committees for the many hours of work that they've put in. So I'll turn it over to Pat at this point.
Thanks, Jeff. My name is Pat Carroll. I'm with Carroll Associates, and we've been involved, as most of you know, on the Greeley campus for over 20 years. We started working with Stephen Blatt and MSAD 51 back when the middle school was first built back in 2002. So, and I think we've kind of pretty much touched every bit of that campus over the last 20 years. But this is definitely the largest project that that the Greeley campus is going to see, and it really brings to closure a lot of the initial thoughts and kind of direction of the original master plan that was done 20 years ago. With me tonight is Andy Johnson. Andy is our civil engineer. We're involved in kind of the superficial, kind of what things look like and how they work on the surface. Andy's the one that makes it all work underground and makes sure that everything drains and proper connections are made to the utilities, and you know, it's up to him to kind of make this thing really work. So he's a key component to the team, and and he's done a pretty amazing job so far. If I can figure out how to do this now. This is supposed to be kind of a sketch plan, kind of informal review, and I know it's the first time that the board has seen this. It's the first time a lot of the public has seen it, although there have been some public meetings and through the school board. But I just wanted to kind of briefly run through this. We're really here to listen as much as we are to talk. And as Peter indicated, or maybe it was Bridget, the intent here is to take this information from tonight, compile it all together as far as any kind of discussion or issues or comments that anybody has, turn this around into a full application that'll go back to you guys at the planning board. Probably, initially we were thinking that we would get it in December for a January hearing, but I think realistically with the holiday season and everything, it's probably going to end up in January, and we'll be back before you probably in February. So that's kind of the rough schedule, but I did want to initially talk about kind of what the overall master plan really is and how it really kind of begins to integrate the entire campus into one cohesive kind of project. So there's really 6 different components to this project, and they're spread out throughout the campus. There's a new preschool, there's a classroom additions at Mabel Wilson, there's a new maintenance building that's required because the existing maintenance building is on the site where the new school is going. The turf field, as has been previously discussed. There's also a series of on-site improvements. There's improvements to circulation. There's some changes in how bus circulation, parent drop-off, parking areas, and so forth really work. We're trying to kind of make this into a more cohesive campus, and some of those things have been kind of thorns in the side of the campus for 20 years, and this is now an opportunity to really help kind of bring a lot of that back together again. And then lastly, there's some small off-site improvements that are going to be required. We have to submitted for a traffic movement permit. The existing traffic movement permit on the campus expired, and because of the new school, they're saying we need a new one. So that's been submitted, and we're working closely with the town on what those off-site improvements might be, but they're minor in nature, but they're still pretty important, and we want to make sure that everybody's kind of on board and in agreement with those. The new school is kind of inside that circle area there. It's on the southwest corner of the campus. This is on land that was acquired by the district from 2 different abutting landowners to make this happen. It's a school of about 75,000 square feet total in size. It's mostly 1 story. There is a 2-story component that handles kind of the upper grades. So this is a pre-K through 1 school. And the whole idea on this is that this school will then, the pre-K 1 grades from Mabel Wilson will then move over to this new school. And then Mabel Wilson will be reconfigured as a 2, 3, and 4 grades, which right now grade 4 is in the middle school. So that'll move back over to Mabel Wilson. And then Greeley Middle School will be 5, 6, 7, 8, and the high school will remain 9, 10, 11, 12. So that's kind of the restructuring grade-wise that's going to happen. There's about 500, the new school is designed to accommodate about 565 students. So it's a significantly large building. It's not insignificant, but as you can see, it begins to kind of form the four quadrants of the campus, and really, it really does bring some closure to this whole property. This is a site plan that we're working on now, and again, these are pretty well developed, but they're not really yet at the point where we want to submit them. We want to still have some flexibility, so if there are issues that come up or discussions that come up, that we can make those changes. But the idea here is we're going to maintain the existing main drive into the school campus. First thing you come in, and then there'll be a parking lot area here. This is the town cemetery. This will be staff parking, but it also forms a kind of a queuing area for parent drop-off along this side. So this will be dedicated parent drop-off for those littles at this new school. It does allow, I think there's 11 dedicated drop-off spaces here, and plenty of room for stacking kind of in the drive aisle of the parking lot. The parking here accommodates, I think, about 65 parking spaces. We have another parking lot here that really functions as it's kind of split between staff parking and visitor parking for the school. The main entrance to the school is here. This is a dedicated bus drop-off lane. I think it accommodates up to 8 buses, which is consistent with all the other kind of drop-off zones at the other schools. So the way this works is you come in the main drive here, staff and parents will pull into this parking lot and park. Buses will pull in here and drop off, and then either extend out and head back out towards Main Street or head internally through the campus. To accommodate all this and to provide this dedicated parking specifically for the new school, we're actually relocating the main drive through the campus. Right now it comes in, and if you're familiar with the campus, it actually jogs in and comes over kind of about like through here and then ties back in. So and all of this right now, I think there's about 100 student parking spaces in that lot. Through this reconfiguration, we're losing some parking in here, and this student parking is getting reconfigured, and it'll be about 75 spaces there. If you're familiar with the site, there's also a detention basin right here that's in between kind of the bus drop-off zone for the high school and the track. And this detention area in here will be converted to an underground chamber system, and then we're going to build a parking lot on top of that. So we're going to add about 32 spaces on top of that parking lot. That, again, will be probably dedicated to the high school students to accommodate those spaces that we're removing from the site here. There's dedicated playground spaces. There's a dedicated area just for preschool. They're separated from the playground from the older kids. The older kids are off the south end of the school here. These are classroom wings. And there's a 2-story wing that's kind of sits in this portion of the site here. And there's room, the way the building is being designed, and unfortunately Stephen Black couldn't be here tonight, he's sick, but the way the building's designed is such that that 2-story wing, the story below, the first story below is designed such that a second story could be added to it. So there's 6 classrooms, the 2 classrooms at each end of each wing here that could be added in the future without any kind of site disturbance or site work necessary. So it's a kind of a built-in expansion for this school in the future. Second item here is at Mabel Wilson. There's some circulation improvements, but the major building piece here is a small addition off the kind of the northwest or northeast corner of the existing classroom wing. This will be, I believe it's 4 classrooms, 2-story structure that'll tie right in here, and it's kind of a funky footprint in here, and the reason for that is because there, as you know, there are currently 2 big portable classrooms on this site, right in here. And the idea is to build this addition while the school is still in session. So while those classrooms are there, rather than waiting until the new school is built and then removing the portables and then building this addition. So it's kind of a little different kind of footprint, but it does work within the confines of everything that's going on here. So that's a small little addition to Mabel I. Wilson. This is the addition here. Where the classrooms buildings were, there are 2 buildings, one's here and one here. These are the portables. Those will be removed ultimately, and that area will be returned to dedicated recreation space for Mabel Wilson. So right now it's programmed as a basketball court, because we're going to be bringing 4th graders, older kids, onto this campus and onto the school, and you know, most of the playground equipment here is really designed for smaller age kids. So that's really designed to kind of accommodate them, the older kids. And then where the portable was over here, this is just going to be reclaimed as grass open space. So, you know, what happened was, if you remember, Tuttletown was in this area initially before the portables came on the site. Tuttletown got moved over to this corner of the site, which was part of the open green space. They lost some green space there, and so now we're able to kind of bring it back to the school again. The new maintenance building is up in the corner here. We were before you probably 2 months ago. About that building was approved at that point in time. This building is required for the public information. There's the existing maintenance building is right here. We looked at trying to locate the site around it, and it just doesn't work. And that building is, in spite of its great appeal, it's in pretty rough shape. So the idea now is to replace that up here in this corner of the site. It's back behind the pool. It's in an underutilized area of the property, and that has been approved by the board, and I think we're pretty close to going out to bid on that project right now. So that's what's going on here. Here's the building. It'll be a drive. It's really a 1-story building with a step in it. It'll drive down because there's about 6 feet of grade change between the parking lot up here and this lower area. All of the yard storage and usage areas for the school will be in this lower area, which will be fenced off. It'll be hidden from view from most of the campus, and we think it fits into the campus really pretty well. Next item is the game field, the turf field. We've been working, as Jeff indicated, we've been working very closely with the turf committee on selection of a vendor or a type of product for the turf. And you know, some of the criteria, and unfortunately Jesse's not here, but who's the chairman of that committee, but the board came to us with a pretty specific criteria. They wanted no crumb rubber, they wanted no PFAS, and a fully recyclable product. So we sorted through, we interviewed, I think, 6 or 7 vendors, turf vendors, and they ended up selecting a product which I believe the board approved at their last meeting, that is fully recyclable. There's no infill at all in it, so that takes that whole kind of issue out of the equation, and it's certified to be PFAS free. So we think that it's really, and in fact, this will be the first field of this type to be installed in New England at all. So we're leading the charge on this, because I think it's really going to be something that's going to be it's going to be required. In fact, I think they said In Europe, it's going to be required in 2 or 3 years. They're going to require this type of field. So we're pretty excited about it. The vendor's really excited to get a product like this going, and that project will hopefully get done this next summer. On-site components, there's a series of parking lot modifications and changes. There's some reworking of the middle school recreation field. There's, again, like I mentioned, some reconfiguration of parking at the high school, and some reconfiguration of circulation and parking at Mabel Wilson. This is a circulation plan. It's come up in several meetings. It's like, well, how do people really kind of move through the campus here? And so I wanted to just give the board an idea of kind of how the circulation really works here, and some of the things we're really trying to kind of consolidate and improve on. This is the campus drive. It comes in off of Main Street. This is Main Street here, Tuttle Road here. Main campus drive comes in, and as I indicated, it used to kind of loop down and around. Now we're going to straighten that out, and so it'll provide a pretty nice straight shot into the heart of the campus. It provides a nice separation of use between the new school and the high school, and it wraps around here and ties in with a campus drive that comes in off of Tuttle Road here. This is the admin building here. This is Mabel Wilson. Currently, student drop-off occurs right here. And so this area is utilized for student drop-off. There's parents that park in the admin parking lot to park and wait for their kid, or park there and walk in to pick up their child. And the buses currently come in off of the campus drive here and drop off on the kind of the southeast corner of Mabel Wilson. We're going to flip-flop that. Some of the issues that we saw initially was that, and I'm sure you've experienced this in the mornings and afternoons, but when the parents come in here to drop off, there's a lot of kind of stacking that occurs coming back out onto Tuttle Road. It's kind of, it's really kind of a congested area. And so the idea is that, and this is the main entrance to the school. So the thought is that the children, the parents that are dropping off their kids, and visitors should really enter this end of the building, not the back end of the building. And so we flip-flopped, and so we're actually able to accommodate almost twice as many parent drop-off spaces in the bus loop that we had originally over here. So that relieves some of the congestion of stacking. It also allows then, the way the buses work here is that the Mabel Wilson buses and the new the new elementary school buses, the kids will be on the same bus for both of those schools. And for the middle school and the high school, the kids are on the same bus, and they're different times. So this way here, with the bus loop here, it just makes kind of the whole linking between the two schools that much quicker and easier for bus circulation. This is the middle school here. This is the dedicated bus loop. This is visitor and parent drop-off area here, and this is staff parking out here. In the high school, this will remain the bus drop-off zone, student parking area, and then we've got this new parking area here. On the other end of the high school, this is going to be, what we're doing here is rerouting the circulation through here, and I've got a plan that shows that in more detail. But we're changing some of the circulation here so it's all two-way versus now it's one-way coming in to this point, and then there's an exit lane that comes out and comes back around here. We're going to make this all two-lane or two-way, and then provides some separation for that student parking lot in that area. And then in the back, we're kind of reworking some of the circulation back there, which you'll see in a minute. And these are fire lanes, and those will remain. And in fact, we'll probably utilize this fire lane here for access when we're building the maintenance building and the turf field, so that they're not bringing construction traffic through the campus, through the high school campus and all this parking. So we're hopeful that that works pretty well. This is a parking plan, and I know there's been a lot of discussion, and I think there's been some letters and memos that have come into the board about the amount of parking and so forth. Currently, there's about 700 and, well, this changes almost daily because we go back through and recalculate and change some things. But currently, there's about 715 parking spaces on campus, and we're looking at bumping that up by about 160 to 877. And we're doing that in a pretty kind of cost-effective, simple way, primarily by taking a look at how these parking lots, the current parking lots are laid out, and a lot of them don't meet current standards as far as aisle widths and so forth. They're congested, they're kind of unsafe, and so by reconfiguring those, we actually are able to add some parking with very little addition of impervious cover. So like we have, let's say and these are, the way this works is that this is staff parking. It'll continue to be staff parking for the high school. There's currently at the high school, there's 125, and we're going to bump that up to about 130. And the way we do that is by, right now, that's angled parking in there. We're going to widen that slightly and then make it 90-degree parking, which is a lot more efficient. So we're picking up some parking there and also accommodating some staff parking for the maintenance building. The drop-off visitor park, well, we'll go through each one of these, but you can see here that we've really, for staff parking, what's existing and what's required, we're up to 422, and we have a total of about 437. So there's some built-in kind of future expansion capabilities for the staff. Same thing with all of these. With the visitor parking, we have what's required, and the way we came up with the required amount is that we actually took the number of staff that are going to be shifted around to the different buildings and added a small factor of that, I think about 5%. Same thing with the drop-off, and the service pretty much stayed the same. You can see we've got 21, and we're adding 4 spaces for the new school, so that's 25. Student parking has been an issue on this campus for a long time. There's currently 225 spaces are existing for the high school kids. As I mentioned earlier, we're impacting quite a few of those by the new school. We're adding some in here. We've got a total at the high school side. We've bumped up from 195 to 210. And then because of some of the changes in parking at Mabel Wilson, we were able to, like here, I think we had 73 spaces originally in angled parking, and by going to 2-way and 90-degree parking, we're able to bump that up to, I believe it's about 90 or so. And because Mabel Wilson is actually reducing in size, the staff level is going to be reduced because of the change in grades and so forth. We're able to free up some spaces here that again could be utilized for high school kids. And our charge initially was to come up with about 300. Actually, we came up originally with 225 student parking spaces to match the existing. And I think the committee or the board or maybe it was the principals, I can't remember, the administration said, no, we really need to be up around 300. So that's kind of where we are. But again, we've done that without really, we're not creating a 150-car parking lot somewhere. We're tweaking the circulation and the alignment of the cars such that we're gaining efficiency. And the only places we're really adding anything is really on the backside of the high school here and here. A couple of small little conversions, and I'll show you here. So in this area here, this is reoriented from its 90 degrees from the other plan, but this is coming in off of Geiger Way. This is the Geiger building here. Currently, this comes in and it's one way through here, extends to the back, and then it's one way out from this point on. This loops around and comes in here. This existing parking lot is only like 52 feet wide. And it really needs to be, each of these bays need to be 60 feet. Well, anyway, the existing parking lot that's there is very narrow. The aisles are really tight, and I don't know if anybody's been in there at night trying to get in and out of those spaces, but it's very, very difficult. So we first looked at this and say, well, we really just need to expand that in order to make that safe and meet the town standards as far as parking spaces. Then we started looking at, well, we're also impacting the high school parking at the PAC, and we need to accommodate that somewhere. So what we've done is this drive through here currently comes in about right here. And all we've done, this would be the expansion of the existing to this point, and all we've done is really more or less add parking on both sides of that drive aisle going out. And by doing that, we've picked up about 30 spaces in there, which is a really good thing. We met today with some of the neighbors from the condos over here, specifically to talk about this, and I think one of the couple of thoughts we had after talking to them was we may look at narrowing this down a little bit so we can get a little bit wider kind of buffer between the parking lot and the neighbors. We might also consider looking at making this parking lot, or at least this drive here, one way in this direction only, so that so you'd come in here and then you'd enter the parking lots like this and like this and like this, and you'd exit this way. And that would prohibit a lot of the headlights from coming in here and shining directly into these homes, which I think is a good thing. So we're looking at that, but right now we're kind of, this is what we're thinking. The expansion on this really does not, it protects the existing green space that's along Main Street. We are not projecting any further towards Main Street than the end of the Geiger building. So we think that's sacred ground out there, and I think it's an important part of the character of the town, and we really want to make sure that we preserve that. On the back of the pool area here, the existing parking lot is here. This is all kind of angled parking, and it's very narrow aisles. Again, there's buses that come down in here and get kind of stuck and have to kind of back out because they can't really turn around. We've kind of reconfigured this, as you can see, to 90-degree parking with wider aisles. And in order to accommodate that, we've actually pushed this parking a little bit beyond kind of the limits of what's there now. We're still meeting town standards as far as setbacks from the property line, and we're able to make this much more efficient and flow better, and we can get emergency vehicles in and out of here now where we couldn't before at a very little cost. I mean, that's a pretty small amount of new paving. And I should also note that this new parking that we're accommodating here, these 3 bays of parking, and a couple of bays at the new school, are all programmed to be porous pavers. So we're using a porous product to allow that stormwater to infiltrate into the ground rather than picking it up and dealing with having to treat that. The other thing that's going to happen here is that the existing lights that are in these 2 parking lots are they're pretty bad. They're kind of on telephone poles and big floodlights. All this area here will receive all new lighting. It'll be LED lighting, and we'll provide photometrics for you for this lighting and any other lighting on the campus here. So I think one of the other lighting areas that wasn't in our original program, but Jeff has asked that we take a look at is the lighting that goes from the field area along the back side of the high school over towards the PAC. That area, I guess, is pretty dark at night, and a lot of people park there to go to events at the game field. So we're adding some lighting there too. This is the landscape and lighting plan, and I know it's hard to say at this scale, but we are intending to provide buffering along the property lines. We had not originally planned on any here because there is a high fence, but given the discussion today, we're more than willing to kind of take a look at that, and we'll be kind of adding that to the plan as we move forward. Based on conversations, it wasn't with the board, but we had council meeting regarding proximity or some relief relating to the cemetery, and one of their comments was to add some buffering along the cemetery here. So we've got that. We've got some buffering along all sides of the new school here to deal with the neighbors. We've met with this neighbor who's your postmaster, and it is kind of tight in here, but he's on board with us planting some plants on his side of the fence in order to accommodate that, and we've got some agreements we're working on with that. There's some new plantings associated with any of these areas that we're touching. We're providing some new plantings that'll be trees and shrubs and ground covers. So it's a pretty robust landscape plan, and it'll continue to evolve until we get to the point where everybody's pleased with it. Off-site improvements, as I mentioned, there's a traffic movement permit application that's been submitted. It appears from our traffic engineers that they're considering 2 to 3 improvements here. The first one being some level of widening on Main Street to allow a slip lane when people are trying to turn into the school campus and traffic backs up because they can't get around. And I met with the traffic engineer this morning, actually it was this afternoon at 1 o'clock, to look at, and specifically there are 3 trees along here. It's 3 big heritage trees that are about 20 feet from the current lane that runs through there. And so we're trying to evaluate how we can widen this, and we're not talking about a lot of widening. It's like 3 to 4 feet maximum, and it's only for this stretch between. There's a driveway over here. It'd be about from here to the gas station down here of widening. And then the second is some sidewalks. There are 2 blocks. I think it's this street. There's a street that comes out over here. I can't remember what the streets are. There's another street here, and the thought is to provide a sidewalk along that section of Tuttle Road to connect those neighborhoods so that those neighborhood kids can kind of walk to school, and then there are 2 dedicated crosswalks at both those locations. So that would be a safe improvement that would allow then more students to be able to walk and walk to school. There is some discussion about a slip lane, widening for a slip lane here, but we're not really sure where that stands. We looked at it today, and it's going to be difficult to do because there's not much right-of-way there, and there are power poles that are right up pretty tight to that curb line. So we're not sure how that would work, or if it even does work, or if it's even needed. So we're not really sure it's needed. And what the DOT has indicated to us so far is that they're going to rely heavily on what the town recommendation is for both of these. So we're working pretty closely. We had a meeting, I think last week, and Bridget was there. And we'll continue to kind of keep that discussion moving forward. Any questions about any of this so far?
Well, why don't you finish it, then we'll do the
Okay.
question. The way this thing works is that they'll complete the thing, and then the board will ask their questions, and then afterwards, we will let the public, and my druthers are, if it's civil engineering related, we'll have the civil engineer answer the questions. If it's, or we'll let Pat if it's there, or if we've got some questions for the superintendent, we'll have him. So probably the three, but the board gets the first cut at it. So have you got some more, Pat?
Well, I think what I talked with Andy about, he's excited about going through a small little presentation on stormwater for you guys.
Well, I think since probably 80% of the people here are concerned about stormwater, I think that will be fantastic.
Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Andy. And then the only thing after that is really kind of, we've got a couple more images of the school, if there's anybody that has any questions about the school.
Well, I don't think at this point in time, I think people are more concerned probably
Sure.
about ground issues
Yep.
if they are the
Yep.
style of the building.
I would agree with that.
Yep.
And then there was just a couple of wrap-up things about schedule and
Okay.
where we
Well,
are in the process.
Let's get Andy, do the engineering thing, the board will have a cut at it, and then we'll turn it over to the public.
Good evening, folks. Andy Johnston from Atlantic Resource Consultants. As you know, I'm the civil engineer here. I did want to start going through the stormwater on the campus, but I wanted to start by going through some of the history and some of the landforms that contribute towards the stormwater issues that have been seen down in Cumberland Meadows, because I think it's important just to get that background of the topography, the morphology, and the soil conditions that make things happen the way we see them happen. And one of the things that is a little difficult for people to understand is that up at the top left, you have the school campus, which is predominantly excessively well drained, very dry site. And right next to it down at Cumberland Meadows, you have a site that has historically had an awful lot of water issues and sees those continuing today. So first off, what is the reason behind that? I'm not going to go into all of these different soil types here. There are some figures that come up a little later on that explain this more graphically. But basically what this background soils mapping tells us is that predominantly the soils on the school campus are sandy, they're overdrained, they are typically Windsor and Belgrade sands. As you get down, there's actually a very sharp cutoff almost associated with the property line there, that then transitions to silt loams and very heavy, very poorly drained soils. And the only soil that I will point out on here is the one that's labeled SN, and that's a scantic soil type, and you'll see that extends up here, all this area of Cumberland Meadows, and all the way up here. Scantic is a hydric soil, and I just put that little label on the bottom there. A hydric soil is a soil that's formed under conditions of saturation, flooding, or prolonged long enough during the growing season to develop an anaerobic conditions. So it's typically associated with wetlands as well. You see that hydric soils are associated with wetlands. So when we look at this soil mapping, we try and find out then what are the reasons for the differences between those two soil types. You don't need to pay attention to the detail of this. It just happens to be a really nice figure. But this is essentially what's going on. This middle one is essentially what's going on. The slope is a little exaggerated, but the school site is on what is called an outwash deposit, which is a glacial deposit. Typically eroded granitic soils that are very coarse grained, so it comes out as little particles of quartz, which is basically sand, and it comes out at the mouth of a river in a kind of a delta form, and it usually fans out. So you get this very well drained deposit lying over the top of what is an alluvial silt, a very much heavier soil, And then this line here tends to act a little bit like a spring line would if you're in a limestone soil or if you're in a bedrock soil. So basically, the drainage, the groundwater drainage will come from way up the topography, and it'll run down this impervious layer and then break out towards the bottom. So what does that look like on a soil map? These two, the colors are a little inverted, but I'll talk you through them. This is what's called an AASHTO group index of the soils. What it does is shows soils in the red and orange that are predominantly coarse-grained, sandy, and then in the blue, it's showing you what are finer and finer graded soils. So the dark blue here are the real fine-graded, silty clay soils. The second one I'll show you, which is even more striking, is the NRCS web soil survey does these helpful ratings. This is a rating for ease of construction or restriction of dwellings without basements. The greens show areas that are not restricted. The yellows show areas that are somewhat restricted, and the reds show areas that are very restricted. And these are very restricted because of high water tables, poor drainage, and all the things that you would expect on the soil types that you see here because of the landform that we talked about. So what does that look like when you look at the land, the actual landform? This is a 1970s aerial photograph. This is the Cumberland Meadows property with Meadow Lane subdivision down here. You'll see the plantings. This is the old orchard on the school site. And you'll see the plantings taper off rapidly as you come down here. And you see these rather distinct drainage ways that come across the property. The darker areas tending to indicate poorly drained soils. And some of these linear features are what you typically see on agricultural areas where people have tried to put in trench drains to try and alleviate some of the water, probably to get on this to try and hay it. And I would suggest that this would actually have even been pretty difficult to hay given the soil conditions. And again, you can see these distinct drainage ways coming across the property. This is before much of the development of the school campus. You can see the original Mabel Wilson there, the old baseball field there, and of course before Cumberland Meadows was built. So given those base conditions, what has happened to the campus over the years that has contributed or alleviated some of those soil conditions? So actually, if I go back to this whole area slopes down to the south and east. So under this condition, everything off that soil, off the school campus, drained basically by sheet flow down to these drainage ways that come across this site. And actually some of the area up here drained off and down across the site to what is the headwaters of the stream here. So the whole school area drained down onto this property before anything was built. In 2002, along with the middle school construction, the engineer at the time, DeLuca Hoffman, did an analysis not only of the school campus, but of the Cumberland Meadows and Meadow Lane subdivisions, because they understood that there were drainage issues down there. They wanted to do the middle school project, and they were thinking, what can we do to alleviate some of the problems that exist on that site right now? And there's actually a write-up about it. We did some research from the DEP records. There's a write-up about it in the 2013 stormwater report. So essentially what they decided to do, and this is pre the middle school. So this is the way things were drained in pre-middle school. You have this light purple area here that came down and drained to two drainage features that run into the Cumberland Meadows site. You have this big central area here that ran right down in between the two circles on the Cumberland Meadows site, contributing about 28 acres. This 2-acre area here drained down to another area that drained down through the Cumberland Meadows site. And then you have the green area at the top, which runs kind of down that swale that runs between the school property and the properties to the northeast here. And you'll see as I run through the timeline what has happened to that. So when they built the middle school, they put in this detention pond here. And the idea, one of the things they wanted to do with this plan is to reduce the amount of runoff that was coming onto the Cumberland Meadows site. So what they did is they captured all the area in blue, they took it to this new detention basin, and then they piped it through the neighborhood. I've drawn this as a straight line. You'll see where it actually runs in a minute. It actually runs down here, down here. Initially, it outletted about here, and then it was continued down to the far side of Meadow Lane to where the drainage system for this entire development outlets. So basically, all of that blue area was designed to go through the detention basin and bypass the whole of the Cumberland Meadows site, taking that out of the contributing area to Cumberland Meadows and Meadow Lane. What was left is this little 1.5 acre area of the middle school parking lot, which was too low to get into the basin to get around. So effectively what that plan did is reduced a 28 acre area down to 1.5 acres that's contributing to the Cumberland Meadows site. And again, just to alleviate the drainage issues that are there now. So this is what it looks like on an aerial. I put the old, before the pre-development drainage ways just on here so you could see where they ran through the site before this was built. In green are the drainage way modifications that were made for Cumberland Meadows to divert some of this runoff around into their drainage system. And in yellow is that pipe that runs from the detention basin all the way through and outlets on the southeast side of Meadow Lane, right here to a ditch that goes down and then joins to the head of the stream where all this stuff goes in the end and still goes now. So the summary of that, what they did for the middle school, which was presented in the stormwater report at the time, showed this area, what they call point of analysis number 2, this very smaller, reduced area of 1.5 acres, and it shows what it did to the runoff. And I'm sure you've seen these in your stormwater reports that you reviewed before. Basically what you do is you look at the pre-development and the post-development runoff under the 2-year, 10-year, and 25-year storm, and you can see the pre-development's flow down to the post-development flow. So you had reductions in the peak flow, anything from 60% to 80% in the 25-year storm as a result of what they did there. And the summary in the 2013 stormwater report appeared to indicate that they thought that this had alleviated a lot of the drainage issues on the Cumberland Meadows and Meadow Lane sites. Of course, with those soil conditions, these things have to be maintained and they have to continue to drain well. And typically in those really heavy soils, it's pretty significant engineering intervention that you need to keep the water table down. And that usually involves numerous underdrains, networks of underdrains, and they will typically, in soils like that, they will typically operate somewhere between a 15 and 20-year cycle, if you're lucky, before they start silting up and you have to renew them. And I think some work has recently been done on the Cumberland Meadows site to renew some of those underdrains. That's entirely expected. So moving on to the new project, we want to take the same approach as far as water quantity goes as has been done in the past. And the plan is basically to expand that blue area even further to take more of the campus down through that detention basin and bypass it right through the Cumberland Meadows and Meadow Lane subdivision. We do that by capturing the field, which wasn't previously captured, and actually the new school and the roof drainage and the parking lot drainage is piped into the system that goes into the basin that currently exists that we're going to put underground down here, and it all goes down to that detention basin and out piped through to the downstream end of the Cumberland Meadows and Meadow Lane subdivision. So that's essentially the approach we're taking. We had to look at, of course, the detention basin here, as well as this existing detention basin, and make sure that we weren't increasing any of the flow to them, which we're not. We're actually using some of the infiltration the high infiltration rates of these very pervious soils to get rid of that, the burden of some of that runoff, and effectively reduce the runoff to this detention basin as well as piping it all the way through. That green area stays basically the same, but we do take some area out of that as well. So we're reducing the flow that comes down to the swale on this far side as well. As far as water quality goes, we're looking at, as I said, some infiltration using underground chambers for the roof runoff for the new school. As Pat mentioned, some pervious pavers here, some pervious pavers in the parking lot addition here, and then the stone base and the granular borrow under the field effectively filters that before it goes into the collector drains. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. So this gets, I'm just going to touch on some of the questions that we've received, and we've received quite a few of them through letters that were sent to DEP, and then they send them on to us and ask us to respond to them. We have put together responses to all of those, but we're not going to send them in until after this meeting because other things may come up, and we may want to address those in that same response. The first one was notifications, and if there's anybody here who didn't get a certified notification of our DEP filing, please let me know. I can leave you my card and my email address. I know they did DEP did receive a couple of letters saying that people hadn't been notified. The people concerned were actually on our certified mailing list, so there were sent mailings. I think Carolee was one of them.
Please just direct.
I can probably, you can fill in the blanks if you don't mind. I think what happened was the certified, so we send out the certified mailings before we put in the application. But you know how the Postal Service works now. Yeah. So I think what happened was the town was notified that the application had gone in, but some of the certified mailings hadn't been received yet, even though they'd been sent out. So I think there was a delay somewhere in there. And Carrie, you can probably fill in the blanks when you come up and talk. But there was, anyway, there was some confusion.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we go through your questions? I think this is, I think since so much of the public is really interested in this, that what we'll do is after you get through that list, we'll go with the board.
Absolutely.
On that, because I'm fascinated, as I think everybody else is, with this information. So go through the rest of it then, Andy.
Yes. There's some technical stuff which I'll try not to get too deep into, and I'll wait for questions and answers on it. There was a couple of questions about existing stormwater infrastructure design and condition, and that's something that we typically put in the stormwater report as an explanation. You folks probably understand that some of the stuff that was done on the campus was done under previous regulations, so it's not designed to meet the current standards. That's not to say that it doesn't function, that it doesn't function as designed, it's just that the standards were different. You're going to come across the same thing at the end of next year when Chapter 500 gets renewed again, which is due at the end of next year. And then anything that we do, including what we've designed for this, would be considered to have been designed under an old standard and not the current standards. So hopefully that explains that. There were a couple of questions around the R-tank, which is the underground chamber system, and the stormwater maintenance plan. And one of the comments was actually a very pertinent one. It was about stormwater maintenance and the maintenance, particularly of these systems, the underground detention systems and the pervious pavement systems, which require specialized maintenance. And sometimes, in fact, the pervious pavement requires specialized equipment. And the general question was, does the school district have the equipment to do that? And the answer is no, they don't. We understand and we know that part of the DEP process for what are considered proprietary devices, which include pervious pavement and these underground detention systems, require you to enter into a contract with a maintenance provider who is qualified to do that work and has that equipment. So we have...
So, Bridget, as we go through this too, so we can put, unless the DEP does it, we can put some kind of a standard condition of approval in there that whatever maintenance type stuff is required to keep this thing done is done, or will the DEP do it?
Well, the DEP will certainly do it.
Because right
They
now, the
require
maintenance
it.
operation is a Larry and Darrell operation,
Yeah.
if you want my opinion. I mean, basically, a second town forest was allowed to be built in in that detention tank beside the middle school. So, I mean, in my opinion, there's no maintenance being done, and unless somebody points a 45, well, I can't say that anymore, the PC people, but I mean, if somebody threatens, I mean, if we got a way of requiring this thing to be done so it isn't done on a half expletive deleted manner.
Well, first off, it will be required by DEP, and what they require us to do is to submit a preliminary contract with a provider who's qualified to do that, and we have that in hand, and I can forward that to anyone. Sterling Stormwater Solutions, who have the vac trucks, they have all this equipment. So
Well,
it's
I know
absolutely.
it was a big and well-thought-out letters, I thought. There was a lot in there on the maintenance thing, so
Yes.
that's why I'm taking a little extra time to, make sure that, this thing just doesn't go floating into Never Never Land, but there's a, okay.
Yes, and some of that unfortunately got lost in history, right? Because before the current stormwater regulations, there was kind of a requirement to have a stormwater plan, but they didn't have what they have now, which is you have to submit the annual maintenance logs. There's a 5-year recertification program where you're required to go out after 5 years and certify that everything is still working in accordance with the design, just like you do when you sign off on it when it's originally
You
built.
can continue with that.
Sure. So there are a bunch of things that will go into that stormwater maintenance plan that will add a lot of detail and will be requirements. But at the same time, if the town wants to put that in as a condition of approval, that's going to be fine by us because it's going to be in the DEP approval anyway. There was a question related to harmful chemicals and what would we be doing about removing harmful chemicals from the runoff from the school site. There are two things I'd just like to say about that. Firstly, the school has an integrated pest management plan which limits the use of harmful chemicals. The only thing I could think of that would be considered harmful chemicals, which are pesticides and herbicides. They are more regulated than residential properties. So what happens on a school site is more regulated than what happens on your neighbor's lawn. You will not get people on a school site randomly spraying large areas with Roundup. You may get that, and it's not prohibited to do so on a private property. There is nothing else on that school site that will contribute to harmful chemicals in the runoff that isn't on the roads, streets, and any other site, including residential sites around the area. They're not doing anything industrial. They're not applying agricultural chemicals to anything, and everything they do meets residential standards or above. The testing of field plastic and rubber came up as a question. Pat addressed the testing of all the materials that are going into that field. There is no rubber. That was one of the conscious decisions of the turf committee. They recognized that that was a concern of folks, and they're going with a product that has no rubber infill. There was a question again about emergent chemicals, and I confess I wasn't really familiar with what emergent chemicals meant, so I looked it up, and it includes pharmaceuticals, personal care products, agricultural chemicals, and industrial chemicals. Again, these are not present on the school campus. Personal care products and pharmaceuticals can be an issue, but they're typically an issue associated with wastewater streams, not stormwater streams. They're things that go into the toilet. Sometimes they don't come out through the wastewater treatment process, and they end up in the effluent discharge from stormwater treatment plants. It is an issue. It's not an issue in this case, and especially not with stormwater runoff. There was a question regarding salt in runoff, and is that dangerous? Salt is a problematic ingredient in stormwater runoff, largely associated with big highways and big highway interchanges. You do get salt and runoff, and it can be an issue, particularly the chloride can be an issue to little what they call macroinvertebrates that live in streams. So it's really, it can degrade the minor life forms that you see in streams. For an example, you will sometimes in high chloride levels, you'll see salt levels in runoff that are 250, sometimes up to 850 milligrams per liter or parts per million. That can be a danger to macro and microinvertebrates. It's not a danger to people to come in contact with that, for example, or by comparison. 250 milligrams per liter to 850 milligrams per liter. The water in Casco Bay is somewhere between 31,500 milligrams per liter to 33,500 milligrams per liter. So if you go into the sea, the concentration of salt in the water is likely to be 20 or 30 times what you would ever see in stormwater runoff. And when I quote those higher levels, it's typically associated with 4 or 5 lane highways and interchanges. That's a very concentrated level for stormwater runoff. There was a question, the final question, which is one that we've actually met with the town about, is the maintenance of the Cumberland Meadows stormwater system, and particularly at the upstream end of that system. As we've seen from what I showed you, the area that drains that has been reduced pretty consistently through the development of the campus. It's not on the school's property. The issues, we can see what the issues there are, and we've walked them with the neighbors. It's essentially, it's a swale that has silted in and overgrown. We frankly, as engineers, we know what the solution is. It's just a matter of finding who's going to actually implement the solution. The solution is pretty easy. You've got to dig out that swale and put in an outlet culvert under the walkway. The question that remains is who's going to do it and the mechanics of it. So from an engineering perspective, it's an easy solution. I'm not a politician, and I can't come up with the way that people work together and do those things, but we know how to fix it. And we've met, I said, with the town and with the town's engineer present, and we're pretty sure we know what needs to be done there. The only other thing that came up here, and I think it was Amy, I don't know if Amy's here tonight. Oh, there you are. The other thing that came up was the potential use of filters. Just filter cartridges to filter out particular pollutants of concern. And I think it was associated generally with the field. And if it is associated with the field, this is a unit that we have used before. We used this actually probably 12 years ago on a field in Connecticut. It's a little in-catch basin thing with a filter cartridge in it. We connected it to the underdrains from the field. At the time, that was associated with potential for heavy metals, with crumb rubber, and some crumb rubber products had high zinc content in them, which was a pollutant of concern in Connecticut. So we put a couple of these on the outlets, the underdrains from that field. We used, as you see, they have an array of cartridges here. We used the heavy metals cartridge, and as far as I know, it has been there and functioning. It gets replaced once in a blue moon, but on the underdrains, the water is generally very clean, so they don't clog very often. But that was targeted at removing heavy metals. As you'll see from this, they have a standard cartridge, a pathogens cartridge, hydrocarbon cartridge, and various, even a microplastics cartridge. So as part of the project, if it allays some of the concerns regarding runoff from the underdrains from the field, this is something that adds a little cost, but it's certainly not a prohibitive cost. And if that allays some of the concerns of the neighbors about those things, we'd be happy to include that in the project. We would just ask if they could let us know which of these they would be most concerned about so we can select the appropriate cartridge for it.
Okay, while we got you up there, Andy, any questions from the board? So what you're saying is that we can have, a wonderfully designed drainage system that the district does, but unless something is done on the town, you've still got basically a swamp down in Meadowbrook unless the town upgrades their drainage system?
Well, if you look at the base soil conditions, you look at the hydrology, and you look at the morphology of that site, there are things that we can do and the things that we cannot do. It doesn't matter what you do on the soil campus site. This site has always been wet. It will always be wet. Short of under-draining, and literally with the particularly heavy soils they have down there, you'd be talking about putting herringbone under drains 20 foot on center, which is what you would do if this was an agricultural field to dry it out. So the water table is high in this. The soil conditions are poorly drained. It will remain a wet site. There are things that you can do to reduce or mitigate the impact of the wetness of that site, but you're never going to fully solve it because it sits at the bottom of a landform and the water table's high and the soils are poorly drained.
Other questions from Andy while he's up there? Well, thank you. This, I think everybody has really been educated, and I know, as I say, 80% of the people, and they'll probably be back later, but I want to, excellent presentation. And now I'll go to the board. Do you have other questions on the project? Ann?
Yeah. Not really a question, but what I'm hearing then is that every time there has been work done, there's been an effort on the school property. There's been an effort and a requirement probably, I believe, to reduce the runoff. And that this will happen again with the new proposal. But there is a maintenance problem on that yellow line, shall we say.
It's not actually on this yellow line, and this yellow line, which is the pipe that comes down from here, has on at least one occasion been CCTV cameraed by the school district because it's their outlet pipe. So they have maintained and inspected that pipe to make sure it continues to. Yes, because it's there. They have an easement through here for that pipe, so it's their infrastructure. The issue, I think, that certainly that I saw was related to this area right here, where you've got that small area of that 1.5 acres I pointed out on that catchment plan that still drains off onto the Cumberland Meadows site. It was indistinct, and we went back and looked at the original plans for the Cumberland Meadows site, which didn't indicate a lot of stormwater infrastructure, which kind of puzzled us. But they had a lot of kind of drainage arrows as to where things were supposed to be graded. One of them showed a drainage arrow that went down here. It stopped at one end of the path and then started at the other end. That may be part of the issue. And frankly, as I said, when I walk down there and I look at this as an engineer, and I think the town's engineer looked at it and thought the same thing, what you need to do is dig out this swale, which has filled in and become over-vegetated, and put a real-size culvert under that walkway, because the one that's in there now, the water doesn't get to it. And I think, I don't know if it's 6-inch or 8-inch, but it's certainly not big enough. And so I think there is a pretty easy, pretty cost-efficient solution to this area here that could be implemented.
Okay.
Okay, other questions as far as the general questions of the project?
So there is one other area that drains sort of along the northeast border, right?
Down here?
Yeah.
Yes.
And no issues with that, by and large?
So I've walked that several times. There's actually a pretty well-worn path up through here. There are some, I would suggest that needs to be, an eye needs to be kept on it. There isn't any erosion as such, but I think, without wishing to point fingers, some of the folks up here see this as a good place to deposit their yard waste, and it's not really clear where the property line is. So there's some material that appears in this, and each time I go out there, it seems to be a little bit different. So that area there does appear to take a fair bit of water down there, not in the summer conditions, because I think it all goes in the ground, but I suspect at snow melt, this runs pretty well down here, and that could certainly use an eye on it.
Okay, other questions from, on the overall project?
Yeah.
I got one, Peter.
Yeah, go ahead, Josh, and then,
Jeff, you gave us the current enrollment for Mabel I. Wilson and 4-5. What's the enrollment at the middle school and the high school currently?
The high school enrollment is about 625 students currently. GMS 4 through 8 is around 850 students right now.
Okay. And is the staff, is it right around 400 plus or minus currently?
430.
430?
Yep,
Okay.
430.
Thank you.
Yep, total staff.
Jeff?
Andy, you spoke on the use of permeable pavement. Is that an asphalt-based product, or are you looking at something else, or?
It's interesting, I actually gave a short presentation on this a couple of weeks ago. Our preference is for the pavers.
Okay.
We've used both in the past, and they've actually both worked pretty well. If anybody, the oldest one I can think of we did is in the Starbucks in Scarborough. The whole of that plaza there and the bank next door, which is the Biddeford Savings Bank, is pavers. Some of the parking areas are also porous asphalt because they V'd out the pavers. We actually originally designed the pavers in there. And that's been in there for nearly 15 years. And the only thing you see is some of the porous asphalt is starting to clog because it's much more prone to that because the pore size is so much smaller. The other places I can, we did one at Waldo County General Hospital as well and a couple of others around Maine. It's interesting, they did a really big porous asphalt at LL Bean, the LL Bean headquarters. If you go past there in Freeport, almost all the parking spaces in that new big parking lot are porous asphalt. And you see it when it rains because it shows up it's like a different shade of black. So that's a big one that's gone in recently. They do require maintenance, but they require less salt. They require less sand because they tend to drain very well and they don't hold ice. So.
Thank you.
I got just
go
one for Bridget. Bridget, when we looked at the property that the town bought, we had a project that was going to put in some apartments or I forget what. I know the buffer to the cemetery was an issue, and I can't find it anywhere in the zoning ordinance, but it was big.
Yeah, so we've addressed that. The school's actually addressed that already with town council. So the state statute requires a 25-foot buffer of, you cannot disturb the soil within 25 feet of a known cemetery boundary.
Okay.
That can only be waived by town council if they find that the disturbance needs to happen within that 25 feet for a necessary public improvement. And town council made that finding, and I can include it in notes in the site when we get the site plan application. But we did take care of that. I was super sensitive to it and worked with the school and got that through with town council.
Thank you.
Ann?
I'm sorry, so they waived that requirement then?
I believe they allowed you to stay in your 15 feet.
Yeah, I think the town setback is 15 feet.
Yep.
And so we have parking that starts at 15, it goes from 15 to 20 feet off that line. But the waiver we got from the town, from the council, was that we would provide a 10-foot no disturbance zone all the way along that property line where the boundary of the, if I can. Pull that back up here, but it's 10 feet and,
Yeah, it's on the,
and so in addition to that 10 feet, we agreed to add some additional plantings within the buffer zone between the edge of the pavement and the property line. So we're 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 committed to, doing the right thing there.
Okay, so the 25 feet went to 10 feet plus plantings.
Yes, the 25 feet is a state statute. It's the
Yes.
cemetery statute. And I think Bridget knows more about this because she's cemetery savvy, but I think it has to do with the fact that, in the old days, before they really described cemetery boundaries, there may be people that were buried outside the boundaries, or there may be people that were snuck in and couldn't get into the cemetery, so they kind of picked a cheaper spot outside the fence line or something. But anyway, the whole thing is to just make sure that there's no disturbance that could potentially be excavating kind of prior burials.
Yeah, and we
And
saw.
we went through a process that illustrated that over the years, historically, that area was always kind of either a farm lane, or it was developed for the last 100 years or so in one way or another. So the chances of having somebody buried underneath there is pretty slim.
Okay, great. I have one more question that kind of goes back to that apartment development as well. There is that right-of-way or the driveway that goes to Tuttle Road it appears to be
Yes,
blocked
that's
off.
down, it's right here.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. We talked with the fire chief about that. We're going to probably use that for construction access, but there's no desire to make that into any kind of a public access to the school site, or to provide even a sidewalk connection. So it'll remain as kind of an emergency access. We're going to put a gate in the fence there.
Okay.
But it's not going to be developed for any kind of parking or drop-off zone or access for anybody coming from Tuttle Road to the school.
Okay.
Pat, regarding the cemetery, my understanding is that you're going to, where those parking places are next to the cemetery, that you're going to put something up higher than just a curbing so that we're not having cars running into the cemetery.
That was one of the concerns that somebody on the council had. There will be a curb there, and there is a fence at the cemetery line right now. I mean, there's an existing split rail fence that runs
Yeah,
continuously.
but a car can go through a split rail fence in 30 seconds. I thought the understanding with the town, and Bob, I don't know where you were on that, that there was going to be something a little higher than just the small curb, so that.
Well, we talked about, I mean, there was a discussion about maybe putting boulders or something in there. But, I think the bottom line was, I think we were just going to add some landscaping.
Yeah, and there's a lot of existing vegetation in there that will remain untouched. So, I mean, we can go back and find those pictures from your presentation, but that is a pretty treed line there. So as much as possible, they're going to remain untouched.
But I guess just, can it be a higher curb?
Well, I mean, typically a curb's 7 inches.
Well, I know the cemetery is, the people involved with the cemetery were a little concerned about that, but kind of open for discussion. So the next question is that my understanding is that there still is some arsenic-tainted soil that needs to be mitigated from the field, and where is the plan to put that right now?
So that's a good question, Peter, and, we've been working on that for a while. The school has hired Hoffman Associates. They are environmental engineers. They've been involved. They did the first VRAP program for the school when the middle school was built. So they've been involved on this campus for 20 years. And as Andy showed in one of those existing photos, this campus had orchards on it.
Right.
And the arsenic came from the orchards.
Yeah.
And it's in the soil. It was in the soil 20 years ago when the middle school was built. They came up with a program. In fact, it's underneath the baseball field that's out there now, adjacent to the middle school. It's underneath, there's a berm up by the high school where it's been been stockpiled. There's a berm on the west side of the middle school where it's been stockpiled. There is arsenic underneath this field. And they've done, I think they did 40 or 50 test pits out there to determine how much arsenic was on the site and the depth and so forth. So it's in the topsoil layer. The topsoil has to come off this site in order to build the field, build the turf field, because the turf field is really kind of a structure, if you want to think of it that way. It has to be on a structural base, and it's built up with, you know, a foot or so of drainage stone underneath the actual turf. So that has to come off, and we were working with the town. We've been exploring other options for that. It's a total of about 3,000 cubic yards of soil that has to come off the site, and either go totally off-site, which is a very expensive solution, or it's allowed to be buried on-site, similar to what they did back when they built the middle school and some of the other additions. So we're looking at that now, and we've come up with several different options for that, and we're trying to evaluate those. But I think the where it's really headed right now is that this is the middle school field, this is the middle school here, and this is the game field. But the back end of this school field here, we're looking at excavating that down, probably about 8 feet or so, moving all of this soil into there, and then berming about 4 to 6 feet above that in this back section of the site.
Okay.
And then all of that would get encapsulated with a foot of clean loam over the top of all that.
So that's in process.
That's in process. I think by the time we make our application to you folks, we will have a solution in sight for that.
Okay. The next one is more, I think, of a Jeff issue, and that is with the new turf field. You're going to have probably, at least 50%, if not more, events going on at that field. And as you're aware, there's quite a concern from the neighbors in Meadowview. And I know about it because the 3 years I was on the school board, they were all over me like a cheap suit with legitimate complaints. And I guess my question is, I think at this point it's really necessary to come up with a formal use program for that sound system. And I think you had said in a public system that you were going to turn the speakers facing the school, but that whole sound issue at the high school is like Dracula. It keeps coming out every time you drive a wooden stake into it.
So we did have an adjustment made to the sound system, and this has been an ongoing issue. We hear about it not just from the neighbors, but we also hear about it from people who attend the games and events at the field. You could be sitting on one side of the field and hear too much, it's too loud, and then you're somewhere else in the field, in the stands, and you're not hearing much at all. So we did have an adjustment made last year. It didn't do everything that we want, partly because the speaker system is older. So I've asked the athletic director to come up with a new system that he can research. And whether it is included in this project or not, we are committed to, if we're going to do this turf field, we're going to make these improvements, we want to make improvements to the audio. So whether it can be funded through this project as an alternative, whether it can be fundraised, that's another idea that the Athletic Advisory Committee is looking at doing, is fundraising for a new audio system. If neither one of those things can be done, we are committed to funding through the capital funds for a new audio system. We don't want to do this whole thing.
I think there's also a usage issue. Right now, it's basically the Wild West out there. And I think the intentions are good, but once the athletic director goes home and everything, and the kids control this sound system, that it's Katie bar the door. So anyway, a word to the wise is sufficient on that.
Yeah, the governor is set so that there's a limit. However, I think there's some other things that go on beyond the limit sometimes. I've asked about it, and I've been told that that doesn't happen. But I think we just need a new sound system altogether. Having one speaker that is controlling most of the audio out there on the field is not sufficient. We need speakers, multiple speakers, pointed at the right places and not at the wrong places. So I agree with you, Peter.
The next thing is, it seemed like the Main Street and the Tuttle Road traffic thing is still up in the air. Is there a possibility that the state is going to make you do that slip lane? And then I assume that's on 75% at least is on the town of Cumberland's nickel. Is that correct?
Yeah, we won't know for sure until the way the process works is our traffic engineers submit an application to the DOT. They then review that application for completeness, and then they will set what's called a scoping meeting. And that scoping meeting will consist of representatives from the district and representatives from the town and their engineers and so forth. And at that point in time, they will decide what the scope of any off-site improvements might be.
Okay.
Now, they have indicated that they would rely very heavily on what the town requests are. So it's really, as much as anything, it's really up to the town, Matt and Bridget and the staff and the police chief and the fire chief to really determine just what that need really is. And at this point in time, they've indicated they don't want a full turn lane. They just want some widening enough so that somebody can kind of get around somebody that's trying to turn. And we looked at it today out there because of those, I think there's 3 trees, one of which unfortunately is an ash, which is probably going to die anyway. But we looked at it today. Those trees we think are, if we can limit the widening to 3 to 4 feet, we think we can do that work without impacting the roots of the trees.
Okay.
So we're conscious of that. I'm pushing really hard that those trees have to remain, and if they can't make it work, then we're going to have to do something else. But that's kind of where we are with this. We won't know until they have a scoping meeting just what the DOT is going to require.
Okay.
But as far as funding goes, we have money in the project budget to accommodate those off-site improvements.
Okay. Anything else from the board before I open it up to the public? And I would ask the public, we don't have time restrictions, but kind of be respectful to your fellow folks so that everybody gets a chance to talk. So everybody over the board ready for the public?
We want to take a break for a little break.
Okay, can we take just about a 5-minute break, and we'll be right back. Nature calls. Thank you for indulging us. One other thing as far as, besides keeping the comments, is also, I mean, if your idea has been repeated, you know, if the concern, let's not hear it a third time. So that being said, anybody that wants to come up and comment, please come to the podium.
I guess I'll be the first one. My name is Dick Grass. I live at 302 Main Street, which is directly across from the entrance into the high school. You know, widening Main Street, I am dead set against it. I don't understand why they want to widen it 3 feet. The traffic problem on Main Street, I live it. I see it and live it. It lasts for 15 minutes. And to take property away from me, not my property, I understand the state, but I maintain it and try to keep it looking nice. And the neighbors around this school have given and given and given and keep giving. What I propose is, if they want 3 feet, then take it on the school side right after. Right here, after this house, right here. My neighbor across the street. Take it from here and run it down to the end of your property and bring it back on. Why does it have to be the burden of the people that live there? It doesn't make sense to me. You want cars to go 15 miles an hour in these school zones, and I can stand here and tell you that they don't, even with the traffic that's there now. You put another lane in there, they'll be driving 25 or 30 miles an hour, I guarantee you. And the Cumberland Police Department can't deal with it. They can't stop them. It's ridiculous. The other thing I'd like to bring up while I'm on it, and on this rant, is that I watch those school buses go in that schoolyard and out of that schoolyard at the end of the day. And I'll be darned, there's not one of them that's even half full. This is a privileged town, and the people can afford automobiles for their kids. God love them, that's great. I wish my parents could have done it for me, but they couldn't. And that's the traffic and the drop-off. It's absolutely ridiculous. I don't think it's right. And if they want to put another lane in, then take it off your property on the eastern side of Main Street. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, ma'am.
My name is Lee Buffington, and I live at 10 Village Way, right next to the high school. I'm addressing the school's draft site plan that calls for removing trees and paving over lawn areas on the school campus to construct 80 new parking spaces for high school student drivers. According to this site plan, there are currently 225 parking spots on campus right now, specifically earmarked for students. This proposal to add 80 more parking places would bring the total number up to 305 parking spaces just for student drivers, which essentially represents one dedicated parking space for every senior and junior currently at the high school. This is excessive and costly financially and environmentally, especially when considering that this proposed plan would increase the total parking spaces campus-wide by 176 new spaces, nearly half of which are slated for student drivers, for a grand total of, and this just changed tonight, 877 paved parking spaces on school grounds. My understanding is that the size of the parking is in part being driven by Cumberland's hefty parking requirements. As an immediate abutter who strongly supports the one campus new school construction and renovation, I do have major concerns about paving over vital green space and removing shade trees to enlarge parking lots. Fortunately, we abutters from Village Way had a very informative and productive meeting on site today with the landscape architect and the school superintendent, for which we are very grateful. We appreciate the school's efforts to improve safety and traffic flow using pervious porous pavers for all new parking areas, improving the lighting considerably so it will be less likely to shine into neighbors' homes, and installing landscape screening and buffers to screen the parking and access roads from view, particularly from Village Way. But concerns remain specifically about the 305 total parking spaces for high school student drivers. Consider the environmental consequences, which I've edited because of what we've heard tonight. The loss of vital lawn and existing carbon-absorbing trees, the increase in traffic, air pollution, and noise, the increase in the heat island effect already impacting the school and its neighbors with higher temperatures, the increase in the school's carbon footprint, and the need for additional screening and buffering along the property line. What is being done to make parking on campus environmentally responsible, especially by students who live within walking distance, juniors, and drivers of single-occupant vehicles? What are the bus ridership numbers for the high school, and what percentage of bus seats are now empty? What is the cost to taxpayers to install and maintain 80 new parking spaces for high school drivers? By building more parking for privileged student drivers, isn't the school district encouraging more driving while discouraging riding the bus and potentially adding a have and have not stigma between students? What is being done to encourage more walking and bus riding by all students? As student populations grow in the future, along with the number of student drivers, what is the plan to save essential green space around the school campus? In this time of extreme environmental and budget uncertainty, I urge the school board and the planning board to consider the impacts of this huge amount of paved parking and at the very least eliminate the proposed 80 new parking spaces for high school students. There's a far better solution for the school, the neighborhood, taxpayers, and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else would like, yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Glenn Morazzini. I live on 15 Meadow Lane. And two issues. One, you did raise, the second person to talk about the noise, potential noise pollution. By Mr. Shapiro's own estimate, the plastic field is going to increase use from 16 to 160 hours in a given season. This PA system is going to be used and unfortunately abused. It has a history of interfering with online church service, online telehealth service to trauma victims, receiving health services on that telehealth. It has interfered with people grieving the death of a family member. And I would parrot the sound of those football games. It's way over the top. So we have a chance to make it better. And I would only ask that if you're going to come up with a new speaker system, when you decide to test it out, don't ignore my emails. The last time Jason Rickard pushed this thing through to turn the speakers back to where they were for 25 years. When it was turned around, my emails, I won't say to who, and it's not to this gentleman. I teased him last time. He always returns my emails, which is like miraculous. I wouldn't do it. But at any rate, they were ignored. I sent 3 of them, and I finally got an email to say, this administrator and Mr. Shapiro, not you, this other administrator and Mr. Shapiro had decided there was a sound decrease, and they were happy with it. They never bothered to ask what it sounded like in our neighborhood. It process is infuriating. Part 2 of the noise pollution. We had a problem with obscene lyrics. I'm not a prude. You had lyrics, rap lyrics, that violated Title IX, that women have a right to an equal experience in sports. They violated the Human Rights Commission, where you don't single out an individual group for kind of negativity and harassment. That was supposedly fixed. I disagreed. This year, there were 3 instances. I recorded one. Embarrassed, I wouldn't play it. You want the other 2 people who heard it? You contact me. I'll give you the contact information. You wouldn't want it for your daughters or your granddaughters. Clean up the PA system, the pregame lyrics, and the noise. We heard Kim Vine was wonderful. She's the first person to come down there off that board. God bless her heart, I had open heart surgery. She was down 2 weeks later. We heard a football game. You couldn't even hear it. It was wonderful. She also heard it when it was out of hell, blowing into everyone's house. You're going to fix it? Okay. Have your neighbors be present in the final decision. That's the first issue. The second one deals with this field. You, the school board, chose to put this field, this synthetic field, it is not turf by definition. This is a synthetic artificial turf. You put it in an area in the center of this campus. There is no spot in Cumberland, in Yarmouth, where more children could be affected by the hazardous elements if they manifest off this field. You made that choice. You put it in the middle of this. You could have put it elsewhere. You could have gone natural. Field of Force over there has flat fields. You don't want to do that? Okay, you got your 49 votes. I don't think there's a person in Cumberland or Yarmouth knows that this field wouldn't have flown through on its merits. But we got it, so the implication is do the right thing. I'm glad maintenance for drainage was brought up. Keep in mind, we also are having the field bought, and Jesse did a terrific job. Research, outreach, he did a phenomenal job. I spoke with him. He also said to me it was up to him. He wouldn't want a synthetic field, but he took it on himself to get the best field he could for the kids. He did a great job. But that company, as good as it is, I think it's a Dutch company. They have been sued over their material not functioning. They've been sued by communities. They were sued by Field Turf, another company. They fought with each other like a bunch of rattlesnakes in Arizona. Let me tell you, go online, look up any of these things, turf fields and lawsuits. They're everywhere. And that includes the promise of no PFAS in the field. Well, that has been broken. In Providence, it was broken in Connecticut, where I grew up. It's been broken all over the country. What does this mean? More diligence. More diligence about the drainage. We have a history of drainage problems from school projects. Now our drainage doesn't contain PFAS, microplastics. Jesse, God bless him, said it. You want a plastic field, you're going to get plastics. He said that the last meeting. All the more reason for diligence. I would ask, scientifically, now we have a situation you can almost put a control to it. Test the soil, test the water, test the grass. Let's see what the chemicals are, the hazardous ones that are in this synthetic field. Test it again after one season, 160 hours of wear and tear. And test it on the fields below where those little kids are going to be playing. Test it in the condominiums where there's clusters of people, including the elderly. Test it in Meadow Lane where there's children and elderly. So you have a chance to do this. And repeat it, not once a year like this gentleman suggested at the last meeting. And it was just something he put out. Wow, this needs to be tested after each season to see what are the new chemicals that are coming off this field. And I got news for you, that drainage is not going to get everything. There will be kids who run on the fields, go out into the parking lots, etc. It's going to be carried there. So you made some choices. Okay, all the more reason. Drainage maintenance, glad to see it was brought up. But testing before, during, and after to make sure these children aren't getting exposed. And I got news for you. It's more the microplastics. Go into epidemiology online and see what all the studies are being done. Do the right thing. Do the testing. And Thank you for listening
Thank
to
you.
me. Apologize if I carried on too long, but it's a feast after the 3-second sound bites at the other meetings. Sorry.
That's no problem. That's what we're here for. Other, Bruce?
Bruce Sherwin, excuse me, battling a little asthma here, sorry. Bruce Sherwin, Blanchard Road. I'm here to talk about, I just got the school newsletter today, the MSAD 51 newsletter. And it has a saying in there that says, leads the way. I'm going to differ with that on a couple of things here. We are not leading the way. We are following the crowd, following the herd on turf and additional parking. Both things that contribute to climate change and global warming. We should be discouraging those things. We're setting a very poor example for our students, putting our own privilege and wants, they're not needs, they're wants, ahead of our planet's needs. If you follow the news and stuff, the Bay of Maine is one of the warmest, if not the warmest, bodies of water coming along. It's affecting our economy. Our weather is affecting winter economies in this state. This global warming, it's here. It's on us. And I don't think we're leading when we promote it with artificial turf that's going to take away grass, natural grass. It's going to contribute to global warming, just transporting the stuff here, just making it out of plastics. When it's done, transporting it back, trying to recycle it. If you read stuff, recycling is way overrated on this stuff. There's a lot of stuff sitting around waiting to be handled. So again, I'm not saying, I do not think we're leading the way on artificial turf and extra parking. Extra parking promotes more global gases, emissions. And like somebody said, these school buses are going around here half full. We should come up with a program that teaches our students, let's respect the earth, let's fill those buses, and let's actually cut down the parking. We need all these cars driving around with one student in them. So, once again, just to say, we are not leading the way. And as far as, I'm not supposed to say anything about the referendum, but the referendum had terrific problems with the turf. Nobody told the voters the problems that turf caused.
Said that
So,
that's
it was
not-
slanted.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mr. Bingham, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for your other comments, Bruce. Ma'am, you wanted to speak?
Hi, I'm Lynn Allen. I live at 306 Main Street. I'm directly across from the school. I am one of your close abutters, like many in the crowd here tonight. I do want to thank you. You put together a great plan. I mean, we need a school, right? We can't have kids learning in little trailer homes. That's not okay. And it did pass. I know that. But those people don't live in our houses. We're the ones that are going to bear all of the disruption for all these years that this is going to take. We're the ones that are going to deal with the noise and the dust and the dirt and not be able to open our windows or pull out of our driveways. That's going to happen. And so I do have a few questions about it. And I am upset about it because this is the first time I've had to talk to anyone about it. Every time I've asked, I've been pointed in a different direction. Nobody wants to take responsibility for the widening of the road or who ultimately is going to make a decision on it. I had the opportunity to talk to one gentleman, thankfully, who did come out and talk to me after I raised a little bit of a fuss and recognized the heritage trees and the fact that we might lose those. Those are my trees, by the way. And I don't think one's going to die eventually anyways. I'm hoping we can make sure that they stay there for a really long time. They've already been there for a long time. And they're absolutely stunning if you've seen them. They're one of the reasons that we fell in love with the house that we live in. And there's no need to widen a road 3 to 4 feet and kill trees so that we can have multiple parking spaces. People have said it. I admit, I only moved here about 3-4 years ago now to Maine, but coming from densely populated areas, no one would ever think of allowing their entire student body to park wherever they wanted to. I know there is a lottery for parking, but I also know that there are kids that enter it that don't even have cars yet, and that live within walking distance. I know because my daughter wanted to enter it. She has no car, and we live across the street. Right? So this is what we're fostering. I'm being honest about it. We're not fostering an environment where we're cutting down on those spaces, and it's the addition of those, the addition of a new school building and funneling traffic through there that is causing people to say, we need 3 or 4 feet. It doesn't sound like much. It's a lot when it's your 3 or 4 feet. It's a lot when it's your front yard, and I understand setbacks and all of that. But as Dick said, we care for that. We're stewards of that. And you're coming for that on the back of everything else you're going to put us through, instead of looking to your own property for it. I fail to understand how that makes any sense whatsoever, to come after the private owners of property in this town and the parents of children in your school, while at the same time adding parking spaces that are quite frankly unneeded. And I know you did speak about changing bus routes. I did hear you when you spoke about that. The fact is we have really ineffective bus routes. And I can say, as others have said, I'm out there in the morning, I'm out there in the afternoon, there's no one on those buses. It is not effective. We're not encouraging the use of them. And there are ways that the school can look to encourage bus ridership. There are incentives that can be provided to families. They're done in other school districts, and they're easily researched. Looking at how to divert our bus routes more effectively would cut down on some of the issues for the abutters that we are going to face. We know we are going to face it. But we're asking the town to help us mitigate it, to not have us bear it completely on our shoulders over and over again when there are ways that we can work around it, through limiting the use of cars on campus, through encouraging better bus designs and bus routes, okay? And simply toward listening to each other and being better neighbors, because I think that's a really big part of it too. I appreciate you giving me the time today. As I said, no one's allowed it before. And that is a little heartbreaking, because we're going to be all in this together pretty soon. And y'all are going to need us just like we're going to need you. I would ask one actual question somewhere in all of my kind of babbling about that, but I wanted to get that out, is at what point in time will we be discussing how we're going to abate the dust, the noise, and all of that as we move forward through, and I understand many different phases, but each phase is going to affect abutters. And we all know that dust clouds rise, and simply wetting it down does not work, especially with the amount of dirt you're talking about moving. And when we're adding arsenic into that, I think you said 3,000 cubic feet of arsenic we need to move. I have concerns about that and air quality and how we're going to manage that. Thank you all for giving me a moment. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
Excuse me. Can I ask you a quick question? So are the building committee meetings that the school board, the committee that's formed by the school board, are those not open to the public? Are you not allowed to go to those and have public hearing?
So I was made aware of the last one. I didn't know about the dates of them. And unfortunately on that one, I wasn't in Maine. I wasn't in state. I was out of state at the time. In addition to that, twice now, I have been told very, very bluntly that the school committee's focus is the school and their mission is the school community and not the community at large. It does not make me feel welcome to be told that. And that was also printed in, one of the school committee members put that out on a Facebook thing as well. I think it might have been right before the vote. It doesn't make it feel as if they would, quite frankly, welcome me or my voice when they are telling me that as a community member, I don't matter. And those are exact words.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Ma'am, you want to come up?
Hi, I'm Deb Dugas. I live at 312 Main Street, which is, excuse me, directly across from the first entrance into the high school. And I'll also note that I grew up on Farwell Avenue, which our backyard abutted the then soccer field, baseball fields, all that, where the athletic fields and the middle school are now. So First of all, the house I live in was my grandparents', and it was built in 1935, and I know things were a lot different then than they are now. However, I am concerned with mostly the traffic flow, and I think it's something that isn't just the town or the DOT's issue. A lot of it is with the school district, and as one of the neighbors mentioned, all those parking spots specifically for students concern me greatly. I'm now retired, so I'm at home a lot during the day. I can't get out of my driveway between 7:25 and 7:45 because of the traffic. And in the afternoon, I plan my appointments around the 2:30-ish time. Avoid that because you can't get in and out of your driveway. I know there's going to be a lot of traffic, whether it's school buses or cars or whatever, you know, because you have to access the school campus. And unfortunately, my driveway's right across from it. But there are things that could be done to help alleviate that, and one of them, I think, is minimizing student drivers. I'm rather old-fashioned and conservative, and I don't think that that's a mandatory thing that students need to be expected to have, especially if they are living within walking distance of the school and/or have easy access to the buses. My other concern is the parking lot, which is pictured in the center of the high school complex. That's directly across the street from my house. That's the one that will be expanding 30 or so sites. If that in fact happens, that's fine, but my concerns are already, it's not necessarily the outdoor lighting, you know, street lights or whatever, it's the headlights. And I don't know if anybody is still on the police force from when I first moved in there, but there were several police officers that know me well because they weren't aware, and I probably wouldn't be aware as a citizen either if I'd never lived across from this parking lot. But the school is used all hours of the day and night, as well as it's lit up inside 24/7. So there's a lot of light pollution or whatever you want to call it. The sign that's lit up at the high school, you can see from any window in my house. But the point about the police department is, when I first moved in there, I was in my bedroom, which is on the front of the house, and it was 1:30 in the morning, and the room just was lit up like the lights were on. And I thought, wow, what the heck is that? So I put my shade up, and there was a car in the parking lot aimed towards my house with its headlights on. Okay. But it stayed there, and it stayed there, and it stayed there. And then I realized it was one of the police officers. And he, in fact, come to find out, was sitting there doing paperwork with the car running, obviously. And I called dispatch and said, could you please ask whatever officer is there to please, you know, shut his lights out? Well, he called me immediately and said he had no idea. He had no idea that was happening or that he was impacting anybody. And you know, it's just an example of one car in the middle of the night. But whenever there's sporting events and things in the evening, there's a lot of activity over there, and I understand they're all going to leave and they're all going to go home. But if you're going to increase the spots in that area, and if you're going to change the exterior lighting in that area, don't just point it towards Main Street thinking that nobody's going to notice or be affected, because the condominiums on the right-hand side, the neighborhood behind me, the few houses, or one house, I guess, between the campus and the cemetery, we're all affected by things, not just during school hours. Whenever any team, whether it be sports, debate, music, whatever, when any group wins any sort of championship, we have parades at any given hour of the night. Now, I'm a big girl, I can handle it, but I have a neighbor who's 94 years old and has been on hospice for 5 years. and her elderly husband is her caregiver. They wouldn't think to complain about this, but every time the 5 or 6 fire engines from the two, from Cumberland and North Yarmouth, the police cars, and all the honking and all that come through at 11:30 at night, I just can't help but wonder, is this the right way to do this? Maybe, possibly, the school district could address that. I'm not against, singling any group out and not celebrating, but maybe you could group it together and have one big parade even, to honor these kids for their achievements. And instead of impacting the whole neighborhood multiple times. That's not my big gripe, but it ties into the traffic flow. And I'm sure that people on Tuttle Road are having, similar considerations about widening. As other people have mentioned, I too hope that if they have to put another lane or 3 feet or 30 feet, however many they need, on Main Street, that it will be taken from the side of the road that the school property is on, because it's just common sense. There's already a turn lane in front of my house. It's not used as a turn lane. Any given time when school is beginning or letting out, and there's a lot of traffic there, people are not driving well. And in recent years, I've not seen a lot of police presence out there. At one point in time, there was a lot of trouble with kids, squealing tires and all that. I don't know why they were there, but the police officers were out there at the end of school when dismissal was happening, just to kind of keep people from going crazy. I haven't seen that in a long time. I'm also concerned with, I'm not sure, I couldn't tell from the presentation, but I'm not sure by expanding that parking lot what that does to the sidewalk areas that the kids use, because when school gets out, there are a lot of children, students, whatever, as well as after games, that come out through and cross, and now there's that crosswalk with the blinking light, which is great, and go over to Food Stop. A lot of kids crossing there a lot. I would hope that that's considered when the expansion or changing of the parking lot's considered, because a lot of foot traffic there, as well as just regular residents, walking. I have a couple of quick things I'll just bring up. I don't need a direct answer at the moment, but one of my concerns when I was listening to the presentation about the wastewater runoff, I'm not sure. I mean, the school system obviously is on town sewer, but I don't know where they hook in, because I'm not sure people are aware, but the residents on Main Street from the blinking light at the Four Corners down to Food Stop, as well as up Lawn Avenue and around Maple, are not on town sewer. So I'm not sure where the high school and all hooks into that, if it's off of Tuttle Road, off of Farwell Avenue. But the issue with the removal of the topsoil from where the field will be, like I said, I grew up on Farwell Avenue, abutting that field and the field below it, when it was an orchard, not a school campus. I know a lot of people that lived on Farwell Avenue and in the neighboring areas that were affected by cancer. You can't prove it was the arsenic, you can't prove it was the chemicals from the orchards, but there is that consideration. And when you're talking about removing 3,000 cubic yards of product and it's contaminated with arsenic, I'm not a professional, I don't have any scientific knowledge about it, but my thought is if you're taking all of that and moving it on site as opposed to removing it to wherever, I wonder about the concentration of that. Does that make it more dangerous? Does that produce a problem 30 more years down the road? I just hope that somebody considers things like that, because it's already been moved, obviously, because this whole area was apple orchards. And I personally would rather see some of the funding for this project be spent on the removal of that type of contaminated soil to wherever those things go off-site, as opposed to relocating it on a school campus that is going to affect generations of children and students that attend here. It may not be concentrated enough so that that's a concern, but I hope somebody looks into that, because I think it's a valid concern. And I thank you all for
Thank you.
the time.
Bob, did you want to say something?
Bob Vale, Tumblin Town Council. I'm probably not going to say anything new that you haven't already heard by everyone else tonight, but I just do want to make a couple of points. You and I, Peter, have the unique position of having served on the school board, the town council, and the planning board, and so I think we're familiar with the processes a lot. To the lady that has the mountain ash in her yard, that was my tree for 10 years. And I spent a fair amount of money with treating that to preserve it. And I know that Dick Grass owned it for a few years also, and he too took care of that ash. And that, so it's an important tree to us, as it is to you.
Okay, no discussion.
Anyways, I think that the thing that is clear to me is that the planning board's role here tonight and moving forward is conditions of approval. And I'll start with the cemetery. Yes, the council did grant the waiver. It was not a unanimous. I voted against it. Yes, concerned about trespassing or getting close to that. But buffering against that cemetery is important, and how that's done and how it looks is certainly important to me. The other issue that is important to me is the proposed, or what could be proposed for Main Street changes. Again, the school is already taking property from the abutters across the street, Tom Powers, your property, and moved then that direction. So I don't think there's any more moving in that direction. Any movement should be towards the school's direction. Stormwater runoff. You all know that pre-flows and post-flows cannot increase, but that, as I've said this a couple of times here, the volume of water increases. It's just the rate of flow that doesn't increase. And so Woody Bragg's property down below the condominiums and below the apartments is nothing more than a virtual wetland, and really has no value, and it's been because of the continued volume of water that goes down onto that property, and has happened that way for 50 years. So I'm concerned about how we address the stormwater flows and make sure that we do the best job that we can to mitigate it. The town has a sustainability committee, and it's sort of a source of pride as to how we look at what we do. We've got a solar field. We talk about our town forest, and the things that we do. We talk about plastic bags and trash bags and things like that. And so I think the challenge for the school department is to examine the use of cars on their own use. And I think there's certainly room for improvement there. Talk about half-empty buses, and we can, I know when I was on the school board, that came up then too, about, student driving and things like that. So we have an industrial site. There's 3,000 people on that campus every day, and the way that we need to, some things we need to address, in particular the noise issue that may not be as part of this application, but certainly I heard it loud and clear, and school board members, I think, hear it loud and clear too. It needs to be addressed. It may not be in this application, but certainly it's something that, I'm not a direct abutter, but a mile and a half away, I can hear it pretty clearly. I think that's all I have to say, but conditions of approval are going to be very important with this application. So I think that the neighbors have spoken loud and clear. I will certainly pass on their concerns to the council, and we will be watching this carefully. Thank you.
So just so you don't get away scot-free, that there's reasonable mitigation of this stuff coming down into Meadow Lane, and there's apparently stuff that can be done to mitigate the situation in Meadow Lane. My understanding is that it's something that the town can do, so it probably is a good thing just to check with Public Works and Matt and everything. You know, if it costs $2 million to run a ditch or something, it's probably, but if there's something that can be done within a reasonable cost, you know, once the water gets into Meadow Lane, Andy has said there are a couple things that can be done, so if that can be followed up with.
I think the school's engineer pointed out a couple of those, and I think that it's important that there's a conversation that occurs with the town in conjunction with this.
Yeah, I mean, okay, well, just so that doesn't go over everybody's head that.
I picked up on that, Peter.
Yeah, okay, good. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'll try to keep this quick. My name is Amy Martin. I live on Meadow Lane. I want to second everybody's comments who've gotten up here and spoken before me. I wholeheartedly agree with everything that everyone has said. I came up to talk about stormwater, but I also, speaking of the parking and traffic, want to offer a different spin on those things. I don't want to repeat what's been said. But specific to the additional parking, I want to suggest the idea that those additional 80 high school parking spaces that students will have at the high school will be vacant when parents come and pick up kids for parent pickup and drop off at the new pre-K to 1 school and Mabel I. Wilson. Every one of those is going to be filled and then some. So if we're trying to figure out, you know, getting more bus ridership and discouraging additional traffic on campus, that's going to be 81 more parking spots that are filled by parents at parent pickup. As far as widening Main Street, which I wasn't on my radar because that's I don't live on Main Street. I want to suggest the idea that having those additional lanes for passing will change the focus of drivers. If they're speeding up to try to pass somebody, they're not watching the road anymore. They're not watching out for my kids who are crossing in the crosswalk. I've seen my kids almost get hit by a car in a crosswalk on the school campus. I saw that almost happen this year. That was upsetting. I want cars focused on driving one lane at a time. The comments that I actually wanted to give regarding stormwater, thank you, Andy, for your explanation on the historical development of the property and the hydric soils. That was really helpful. I want to acknowledge, first and foremost, I know water flows downhill. We're not asking anyone to send the water to flow uphill. It's still going to flow our way. The site plan, I think, which I've reviewed very thoroughly, I think includes really good engineering design for stormwater management. But so what I want to just read here is 2 sentences out of that plan for emphasis here to the board, which is that the effectiveness of the water quality management provisions and other components of the stormwater management system are dependent on their design, upkeep, and maintenance to assure that they meet their intended function over an extended period of time. It's critical that the stormwater management facilities are regularly inspected and that maintenance is performed on an as-needed basis. After construction is complete, MSAD 51 will own and maintain that stormwater system. So that's why I've provided comments to the DEP and to the board, focused on the inspection and maintenance plan. MSAD 51, when they're responsible for that maintenance, can't be expected to do a good job if they don't have a good plan. Right now, I think that inspection and maintenance plan needs quite a bit of improvement and specific instruction for how to maintain their specific structures. And then water quality as well. Andy, again, thank you for proposing that Fabco filter. I think that's great. I don't know what type of filter it needs or what type of cartridge. I suggest that the turf manufacturer is asked what type of runoff contaminants might be present. It's, you know, as far as, you know, I know there's no rubber, I know there's no PFAS. Emergent contaminants in the list that you put up, Andy, does include industrial chemicals. This is an industrial product. It's made of something. We need to find out what it is, whether that's information disclosed by the manufacturer or information that we gather through routine water quality testing. That way we can filter it at the under drain system for the turf field or any other points of collection. I think that routine water quality testing program would help us know what's coming downstream. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes.
My name is Carol Lee Lindsay, and I live in Cumberland Meadows. I'm on the Board of Directors, and I'm not going to add anything new. And I do underscore a lot of what people have shared in terms of their concerns. I do want to highlight that I really appreciate the presentation that Andy made, as well as the fact that I do feel like people have been responsive to me. I've been in touch with Pat, Carol, and Andy early on and invited them to walk the property around Cumberland Meadows. I've also been in touch with Matt Sturgis and Chris Bolduc around the same issues, and I do feel like there's been responsivity around that. I also think there could be better ongoing communication so that, I hear that the board is meeting, that the town is meeting with the planners and that there are things being discussed, and I just think that ongoing communication around what's happening would be helpful. Thank you.
Well, I guess I'm a little disturbed if community members are, Jeff, something you might want to look into, if community members are not welcome to these committee meetings, that's probably, as Martha Stewart would say, not a good thing. Do you know that as a fact? No. Okay. Anything else? Oh.
Tim was going to talk to it.
Okay.
Hi, Tim Valenti. I am the chair of the building committee. So we hold public building committees every 2 weeks, just about. That will probably change based off subcommittee in need. It's Wednesdays, 6 to 8. Public is welcome. We've had the public speak. We encourage a lot of public engagement because I think that it's an opportunity for a lot of back and forth that we have here that we sometimes don't have the structural capacity at school board meetings. But I will say this, as long as I'm up here, please do come to those meetings. But I've come here today not to defend any site or anything like that, but to listen and hear. And what I'm really taking away is the difference in some of the feedback that we're getting tonight versus what sometimes we hear at the board meeting and some of the concerns. I think some of the parking issues we'll definitely review. Tomorrow we have a subcommittee meeting for mechanicals, but I kind of wish it was a regular building committee because there's so much tonight to process and to work through. And to anyone that does not feel welcome to either a subcommittee or to a board meeting, please know that I don't know any member, and I can speak for myself, that feels that we are an isolated group. We are much better with the feedback from you guys. And if we don't respond or it looks like we're just nodding, just know that we are taking a lot of that in. We have a whole list of notes here. And we'll definitely be reviewing a lot of the stuff that you guys talked about tonight, for sure, at the next building committee meeting, which will be in January.
But it might be a good idea, too, because, those of us who don't have kids in the school system, we don't read anything that on the MSAD 51, but there are 2,000 or 3,000 people that read the Cumberland Crier, and if they see in the Cumberland Crier that there's going to be a building committee meeting, especially a lot of the folks that are here tonight that have got skin in this game, that will kind of encourage them to go, because, it's tough with the school board. I've been on it, and it's the 3-minute, and I've been through this drill, and
one of our subcommittees is going to be a communication part of that starts in January. And so part of that will definitely be different outlets. Yeah. So for that to happen.
But that needs to go in the crier when you start having these public meetings because, as I say, the average person in this audience, unless they have a kid in the school system, doesn't really pay attention. But thanks for coming, and you know, I think we're kind of accomplishing what we've tried to
Yeah.
do, is get that public feedback. So is there anybody else that wants to talk before I cut public comment off?
I would just add that taxpayers are interested in what's going on in the school.
Yeah, good point,
Not
Bruce.
just parents.
Good point, Bruce. Okay, I'm going to close the public portion, bring it back to the school board. Pat, Andy?
Board. Planning board.
Yeah, planning board.
Bring it back to.
Yeah, bring it back. I'll tell you, it's been a long, it's been a long night. So, Pat and Andy, Jeff, have you guys gotten enough feedback out of this? Anything else that the board wants to add?
Yeah, I had a couple.
No, I think that, as I mentioned earlier, we're here really tonight as much to listen as we are to
Yeah.
talk. So we're going to take all this back and kind of discuss it internally and see what we can do to massage things. And, you know, we'll be back. I'm in pretty close communication with Bridget.
Yeah.
And Matt, and
Well, thank
and
you,
everybody
guys,
else
and
is too, so.
Andy, that was a great presentation. I think it's, you know, especially with the historical thing, and basically we built that development on a swamp. Now we need to find a way to drain it.
It is, but likewise, it's very helpful for us to hear feedback from people personally, so we can take some of that on board. And there are things that we can do, and if there are things that we can do and we can manage them as part of this project, we will.
Well, Bob Vale heard you. Okay, well, we'll cut off that and go on to, if I can find it.
Yeah,
Yes.
I had a couple of comments.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I just wanted to say a couple of things after listening to everybody's great comments. First, there are rules that govern construction that are supposed to keep down stuff like dirt and noise and so on. And there are also definitely environmental rules that are going to impact what you can do with the contaminated dirt and land and so on, right? Am I right?
Yeah, and that'll be governed through a DEP, through the VRAP process, but also, you know, as well as the DEP applying conditions and the general conditions they apply to construction projects, you know, you as a board have the ability to also put in place what you need to put in place. And if you see, it may be that through the DEP they require what we call third-party inspections on this site. If they don't, you have the ability to require that on the site during construction, so you have somebody independent looking at everything as well. So, yeah, absolutely, we can cover that.
Okay.
Anything else?
Yep. The other thing I was going to say is on the 80 parking spaces and the increased student drivers and so on. I heard some ideas that I think we need to think out of the box a little bit here and consider some ways maybe to decrease, because the comments that were made about the environment and the impact and so on are great. I mean, they're right on point. That's where we are. So, okay.
All set? Thank you, guys. And thanks, everybody who's still here for coming. All right, we're going to move on to administrative matters and new business. First item is to review amendments to the Cumberland Code of Ordinances, Chapter 30, Boards and Commissions, Article 1, Planning Board. Recommend to the town council for their review. Has anybody, I assume everybody's had a chance to review these.
Yeah, which one are you on, Peter?
I'm on item 1.
Chapter 30.
Code of Ordinances, Boards and Commissions, Article 1.
The only comment I had, Bridget, I think it's the new C, the board shall review and issue its order with respect to all proposed site plans. Should we add parenthetically see chapter 229 site plan review.
Sure.
So I guess my question is, Bridget, are you looking for just general ideas? Because it sounded like you're going to be dealing with this next month.
Yeah, so this is the first time you see it, and then we're going to give it to town council to review, and then they're going to kick it back to us for a public hearing. So we'll hold the public hearing, which is part of the process to change an ordinance, and then they will, then if everything is set in the way that the board agrees with, you would then recommend it back to town council for their approval.
Okay, so in terms, I've gone through it and I've marked a few things for editing, but I'm presuming you can do all of that later. Just
Sure.
general.
Yeah, if you've got edits, you can feel free to email them over.
Okay, all right.
I had a question. It seemed like the planning board would go out of existence at the end of a new comprehensive plan.
Right.
Is that true?
Like just the way that it is written now? The way that it was written. Is that what you're asking?
Well, it seemed to me as once a new comprehensive plan was adopted, that the planning board there'd be a new planning board? I just didn't understand that.
What are you referring to?
30-7?
30-7.
Are you in 30-7? I mean, I
you-
didn't adjust that. It's super, I mean, I agree with you, it's confusing.
Yeah, the present planning board shall continue in existence and continue its functions until a new planning board is appointed in accordance with this article. The town
So I think
present
it's just so this was the establishment of the planning board. So the initial appointments happened after this ordinance was passed. So then from then, any appointments after that, like the initial planning board continues until the new people are appointed on. And then they continue. So it was just, it's kind of, I interpret it as being related to the initial planning board that was established.
Oh, okay, because
In, what was it, 74?
But I did pick up on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
it's a little weird.
and I hadn't, I was only paying attention to the changes, but
Yeah, me too.
there's nothing in there that says it has to do, I mean, if we all get kicked off the planning board, or, hey, so be it. But now that we're coming up on a new comprehensive plan, the town do we want to strike that? Because there's nothing here that says, at this point, it could be interpreted as when the new comprehensive plan
Yeah.
gets done,
Yeah,
we're going to have a new planning
let's
board.
strike that. Good point. Well, it just proves that, I am reading this stuff.
Good job.
It's just not you, Ann. So are we ready to, do we have to,
I will make a motion that we recommend to the town council, that the town council review the amendments to the Cumberland Code of Ordinances, Chapter 30 Boards and Commissions, Article 1 Planning Board as amended.
do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Very good. Then we move to 2, review amendments to the Cumberland Code of Ordinances, Chapter 250, subdivision of land and supporting appendices C, D, and E, and recommend to the council for review.
You want me to
Uh,
jump in on that, or?
I don't know, do you want comments, or do we define farmland anywhere? Or is this going to be left up to someone's interpretation?
I thought we did, but I don't see it.
It's not in the definitions.
Yeah, I don't,
Real quick.
because that's coming out of the state code or something, correct?
Oh, yeah, the addition there is coming out of state code.
And
so
does the
we might
state
need to
code
add the
define
definition.
farmland? Because I just see, what isn't farmland? If we cut down all the trees, it's farmland.
thought we had defined farmland, but.
I know Bob's brought that up a couple times, and that's sort of my concern is like the open space, we need to base it on, what might be good farmland if apocalypse strikes.
I can add the state definition in. It doesn't look like it's in our ordinance.
Oh, we've got prime agricultural land.
That would be different.
I'm going to be a wise, you-know-what, but I'd like a definition of rural character sometime.
In S, lake phosphorus concentration, it talks about increasing a Great Pond's phosphorus concentration, but it never speaks to a lake. Should we expand? Should we change the title of that to be Great Pond phosphorus concentration? Should we add other water bodies along with Great Pond? It just seems a little inconsistent and strange that we only care about phosphorus in Great Pond.
Yeah, that's just directly copied out of the state statute.
That would be my guess with the way that this all got added, because then there's the whole, but, the other question so then down on U, if a violation of rules adopted by the Maine Forest Service to substantially eliminate liquidation harvesting has occurred, the planning board must determine prior to granting approval for the subdivision that 5 years have elapsed from the date the landowner under whose ownership the harvest occurred acquired the parcel. So that to me reads that if I own the land and I do liquidation harvesting 4 years after I purchased the land, that then I can, I can then ask for approval of a subdivision.
Yeah, I think after 5 years.
But it's 5 years after ownership, not 5 years after liquidation. 5 years have elapsed from the date the landowner under whose ownership the harvest occurred acquired the parcel.
Okay.
I don't think that, and is the intent that the landowner who owns the parcel actually can't do a subdivision? They have to sell and then maybe wait 5 years? I'm not sure what the intent of that.
I read it as 5 years have elapsed from the harvest,
Right, but then I guess what I'm saying, then I don't know why the ownership matters. It ought to just be, I don't care whether it was the owner who owned it when they harvested or somebody who bought subsequent, but 5 years has to elapse since the harvest, but they seem to be harping on the landowner who did the liquidation harvesting and their purchase date. So to me, I mean, the way that reads, I feel like I could liquidate harvest, and I've owned the land for 6 years. I can do a liquidation harvesting and immediately come in and ask for subdivision approval because I've met that criteria.
But I'm interpreting it as if it's 5 years from the harvest.
But that's not what this says.
Okay. Well, I can get this over to the town attorney. Again, this is verbatim in the state statute.
Oh, I'm not finding fault. I mean, I don't think it meets, trust me. That, I just got an email on the, paid family leave. And as a self-employed person, I can pay 0.5% and then grant myself paid family leave for 12 weeks. 12 weeks. The moral hazard. So I'm not, and the state seems to be convinced that because I own an S corp, I'm still self-employed, which is not accurate. So I think we need to hold ourselves to a better standard than the state. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, as long as we're as restrictive or more restrictive than the state. And I can get clarification on the language from the attorney.
I think that does it for me.
Anybody else? No, I'll entertain a motion to forward it to the council.
I will make a if I can scroll, motion that we recommend to town council review the amendments to the Cumberland Code of Ordinances, Chapter 250, subdivision of land and supporting appendices C, D, and E as amended.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor? Okay, do we have any other? Bridget, what does December hold? We are in December. What does What does January hold for us?
It doesn't sound like the school, so it may just be ordinance changes, and if that's it, then we'll just push them into February, probably.
Okay. So I'll introduce, or I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Paul.
We're here. Thank you.